Chapter 961. Tian Shueching laughed bitterly in her heart. She lowered her eyes and was about to put down her sleeves. "Hey, what happened to your wrist?" A voice suddenly sounded from behind her. She quickly took 2 steps to the side and looked at the handsome and childish young man behind her. She pursed her lips and said, "It's nothing." Then she turned around and walked towards the red-crowned crane. She had to rush back within 2 days, or else Ji and Huang would faint. The continuous blood loss made her dizzy, and her steps were slightly unstable. "Your face is too pale. This is a symptom of excessive blood loss." Helian Xiao was a warm-hearted young man. He looked at Tian Shueching and frowned. "Why did you cut your wrist to commit suicide?" There were many ways to seek death in this world, especially in this continent where psychokinesis was common. It was extremely easy for a person to seek death. No one would choose to cut their wrist, which was a traditional and painful way of seeking death. Therefore, Helian Xiao looked at the cut on her wrist and felt that it was very strange. "I didn't commit suicide." Tian Shueching's eyebrows jumped. "Then what happened to your wrist? It can't be someone else who cut it, right? I think you cut yourself." Helian Xiao dealt with weapons every day, so he was very familiar with all kinds of wounds. He could tell by looking at the length and depth of the wound on her wrist. Moreover, you used a short blade to cut yourself. Looking at the shape of your wound, it should have cut your artery. Tian Shueching didn't want to explain to him and didn't want to pay attention to him. She said, "It has nothing to do with you." She walked in front of the red-crowned crane and wanted to jump on it. This was obviously not an ordinary red-crowned crane. It was twice the size of a normal red-crowned crane. It probably didn't recognize Tian Shueching. When it saw Tian Shueching landing on its body, it let out a long cry and subconsciously dodged to the side. It even pecked at Tian Shueching at lightning speed. Tian Shueching dodged. She didn't know if it was because she had lost too much blood, but her movements were much slower than before. Seeing that she couldn't avoid the red-crowned crane's huge mouth, she steeled her heart and raised her arm to block. Damn it! Fortunately, Helian Xiao saw that the situation was bad and acted in time. He sent a palm towards the red-crowned crane's huge mouth. His kung fu was very high, and he did not want the beast to hurt people, so his attack was very heavy. The red-crowned crane cried out in pain and flew out horizontally. After the red-crowned crane flew out, it rolled on the ground before barely jumping back up. Blood flowed out of its huge mouth, and it opened its mouth to let out a mournful cry. It didn't dare to stay any longer and didn't care about Tian Shueching anymore. It flapped its wings and flew away. Tian Shueching, her face was pale as she looked at Helian Xiao. Now that even the red-crowned crane had flown away, how was she going to go back? Helian Xiao raised his head and said, "This kind of beast needs to be taught a lesson." He then looked at Tian Shueching and said, "Strange, I remember that your martial arts are quite high. How come you almost couldn't dodge this beast's attack?" Tian Shueching took a deep breath and suddenly grabbed Helian Xiao's collar. "Think of a way to help me catch up to that crane." She was small in stature, but her strength was not small. Helian Xiao was caught off guard by her and staggered. He quickly used a pole to stabilize himself. "Hey, let go of me. Men and women shouldn't touch each other. Why are you chasing that beast?" Tian Shueching finally let go of him. "I want to return to Chong Kong country within 2 days, so I can only ride that crane. Is there any way to catch up to it?" Helian Xiao tidied up his collar and looked surprised. Chapter 962. That Ji and Huang has already treated you so badly. Why are you in such a hurry to go back? There is a relay station 100 miles away from here. You can rent a flying beast there. You can rent one and fly back slowly. Your body is not suitable to ride fast-flying beasts. Otherwise, if the wind is too strong, you won't be able to. Where is the relay station? Which direction? Tian Shueching interrupted Helian Xiao's chatter. Do you see the small left path in front? Follow it until you reach the end. Helian Xiao pointed in the direction. Tian Shueching did not say anything and turned around to run towards the small path. Helian Xiao was speechless. Tian Shueching was running while gasping for breath when she heard the sound of galloping behind her. "Hey, that crown prince consort!" Tian Xueqing was stunned. She turned around and saw Helian Xiao running towards her on a lion. Stop right there. Tian Xueqing raised her eyebrows in surprise. Why are you chasing after me? Helian Xiao stretched out his hand to her from the lion's back. Come up, I'll send you there. He beat her red-crowned crane away and felt bad seeing a weak girl running on foot. After much consideration, he decided to send her off. Tian Xueqing's face was slightly red because of running. She looked at the lion and then at him. She took a step back. No, I can run there myself. Helian Xiao was not in a good mood. Your body should be resting. It's not suitable for such intense activities. I'm just sending you off. I don't have any other intentions. Tian Xueqing paused. All right, then I'll have to trouble you to send me off. She flew up and sat behind Helian Xiao. Helian Xiao suddenly felt uncomfortable. Although he was still a child, he felt that he was a man. A man letting a weak girl sit behind him like she was hugging him. Hey, you sit. He was about to say, you sit in front, when he suddenly felt a hand on his waist. He was not prepared at all and flew out like a cloud. When he landed on the ground, Tian Xueqing had already flown away on his lion. She only left a sentence in the air. I'll borrow it temporarily. I'll let it go when the time comes. Helian Xiao was speechless. He did not expect Tian Xueqing, who looked so delicate and timid, to have such a valiant side. He was stunned for a moment, and by the time he reacted, Tian Xueqing was already far away. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. In fact, he only needed to whistle once, and the lion would run back. But in that case, this crown prince consort probably wouldn't be willing to ride it, right? Forget it. His lion knew the way anyway. This crown prince consort would probably release his lion once they reached the relay station. The carriage on the back of the golden-winged giant eagle was specially made. Ji Yinhuang sat in the carriage without any expression on his handsome face. His eyes were slightly lowered, and no one knew what he was thinking about. Big brother crown prince. Ji Yunyao squeezed into the same carriage as him. That familiar feeling of happiness welled up, and her heart was filled with joy. I'm tired, don't talk. Ji Yinhuang closed his eyes. All right. Ji Yunyao obediently agreed. After a moment, she comforted him as if she was afraid that he would be worried. Big brother crown prince doesn't need to worry about imperial father's illness. When I came here, I heard the empress say that imperial father's spirit is quite good. He only caught a slight cold. There's no need to worry. She looked outside the carriage window again. The clouds were rapidly retreating. It was obvious that the golden-winged giant eagle was flying at an extremely fast speed. Chapter 963. Brother, tell the rock to slow down. There's no need to rush. She only wanted to be alone with Ji Yinhuang. Every second counted. This time, Ji Yinhuang was surprisingly easy to talk to. He whistled, and sure enough, the Great Pang's flying speed slowed down. Ji Yunyao was delighted. It turned out that brother crown prince still treated her so well. Without that woman by his side, he finally returned to being the brother crown prince she was familiar with. Although Ji Yinhuang did not say anything and did not even look at her, she felt that as long as she could stay by his side, she would be the happiest. She saw that Ji Yinhuang had his eyes closed, so she did not dare to disturb him. She leaned against the window and looked at the scenery outside. While she was looking, she suddenly saw a familiar figure catching up from behind. It was her red-crowned crane. How did it catch up with that woman on its back so quickly? Ji Yunyao was slightly displeased, but when she took a closer look, she was stunned for a moment and let out a small sound of surprise. The red-crowned crane flew over on its own. How could there be a person on its back? Where was the crown princess? Did she fall down? When the red-crowned crane caught up with the rock, it finally saw its master and let out a long cry of grievance. Ji Yinyao's heart sank. She wanted to stop the crane, but it was too late. She could not help but look at Ji Yinhuang. Ji Yinhuang opened his eyes and casually looked out of the window. He saw the crane and his golden-winged rock flying side by side. There was nothing on the crane's back. His expression changed slightly, and he suddenly straightened his body. Where is Tian Xueqing? Ji Yunyao was tongue-tied. I don't know. I only told Bai to carry the crown princess. Ji Yinhuang looked at her with a sharp gaze. Did you do something to the crane? No, Ji Yunyao quickly denied. However, she was not confident. She did tell her red-crowned crane to teach that woman a lesson. Her gaze suddenly fell on her crane. Aya, Abai is injured. Who attacked it? Damn it. Who bullied my Abai? She obviously felt sorry for her red-crowned crane more than the crown princess. Ji Yun Huang coldly said, Ask it where the crown princess is. Do you still need to ask? Someone must have attacked her. What did that woman do? You actually summoned the enemy and caused my Abai to be injured as well. Ji Yunyao complained. Ji Yun Huang ignored her and suddenly whistled. The golden-winged great pung that was in the middle of flying made a turn and flew back. Ji Yunyao was shocked. Brother, you want to go back and look for her? If she had fallen from the sky, she would have died a long time ago. It would be useless even if you found her. He might as well instruct his men to search for her body along the way. Let's hurry back to the city. Father is still waiting for us. It's good that that woman fell to her death. It could also be considered as removing the thorn in her heart. Big Brother Crown Prince was hers, and any woman who coveted him deserved to die. Before Ji Yunyao could finish her rambling, the carriage door suddenly opened. Her body was pushed out of the carriage door by a strong force. Her body immediately floated into the air. She screamed in fright. Before she could stop screaming, she had already landed on the red-crowned crane's back. The crane swayed and almost threw her off. She desperately grabbed onto the crane's feathers and barely stabilized her body. When she raised her head again, Ji Huang's golden-winged rock was already far away. Only one sentence was left floating in the air. You go back first. I'll catch up later. Chapter 964. Ji Yunyao stared blankly on the back of the red-crowned crane and clenched her fists tightly. Needless to say, Ji Huang must have gone back to find his crown princess. Could it be that Brother Crown Prince had fallen in love with his crown princess? When Ji Huang found Tian Xueqing, she was riding on the back of a curtain-winged bird and flying in his direction. The curtain-winged bird's flying speed was considered fast among birds, but it also had a bad habit. This bird had a violent temperament. No matter who wanted to ride it, they had to tame it first. This bird was even more unruly than a wild horse and was the hardest to rent out. Ji Huang did not expect that she actually dared to ride this kind of bird and was slightly moved. Tian Xueqing seemed to have sensed him and raised her head to look at him. Since Ji Huang was close, he naturally saw her clearly. Her face was pale, and her hands were tightly grabbing onto the feathers of the bird. Her palms were covered in blood. It was obvious that Tian Xueqing had suffered a lot in order to tame this bird. At this moment, her petite body was curled up on the bird's back. Her clothes were obviously thin and fluttered wildly in the wind. When she saw Ji Huang's carriage, her eyes lit up and she stared at him with wide eyes. Seeing her like this, Ji Huang's indescribable irritation rose up again. He glanced at her indifferently and whistled. The golden-winged rock turned around again and flew forward. The light in Tian Xueqing's eyes dimmed. She thought that he would let her enter the carriage on the golden-winged rock's back. But she did not expect, perhaps, he flew back just to see if she was dead. After all, she was his cauldron and the source of his recovery. He did not really care about her. He just did not want her to die now. She tightly pursed her lips and felt even dizzier. She knew that she was running a fever and urgently needed rest and nourishment. However, she did not have the ability to fall sick. The wind was strong, but she was so weak that she did not have the strength to take any protective measures. She could only subconsciously grab onto the feathers of the bird and bite her lips in torment. Because of her special fate and physique, she was nurtured as a medicine person. In order to make the medicine in her body better and purer, she had suffered unimaginable hardships since she was young. Therefore, her endurance was especially strong. If it was another woman who was as weak as her, she would have fainted by the wind. However, she was still able to hold on. However, the journey was too long. She didn't know how long she had been holding on. Finally, she exhausted all her strength and fainted. His body tilted to the side, and his fingers slowly loosened. She didn't notice that Ji Huang's golden-winged great pung was actually not far from her. Although Ji Yinhuang hated her, he couldn't really ignore her. He seemed to be resting with his eyes closed, but he was also paying attention to her movements. He saw that she had been blown by the wind until she was leaning against the back of the curtain bird. Her clothes, skirt, and hair were pulled back in a line by the wind. He knew that she had not taken any protective measures. He was infuriated. Was this woman trying to trick him again? He picked up a book beside him to read, but his mind was in a mess, and he couldn't continue reading. When he glanced out of the window again, he saw her little hand slowly letting go of the feather and her body sliding down. Damn it. If she were to fall from such a height, she would only be smashed into a meat patty. Ji Yinhuang quickly ordered the golden-winged roc to approach the large bird. Then, in a flash, he leaped onto the back of the large bird and caught her just as she was about to slide down. Chapter 965. The moment Ji Yinhuang held Tian Xueqing in his arms, he realized that her body was burning hot. She was having a fever. Damn it! He cursed under his breath and carried her back to the carriage on the golden-winged roc. Although her body was burning hot, her hands and feet were ice cold. Her body was trembling like a pendulum, and her small face was pale with a hint of greenish yellow. Her hands were dripping with blood, and there were deep and shallow wounds on her palms caused by the bird feathers. She had completely fallen into a coma and was murmuring from time to time. Her words were vague, and he could not hear them clearly. He could only hear her shouting, "Mother, save me." Occasionally, she would say, "Qing Qing is so sad." Ji Yinhuang looked at her with an indescribable feeling in his heart. This woman had schemed against him, and he had no choice but to be together with her. He had always been distant, cold, and courteous towards girls. However, towards this woman, he had always been blunt. He had never really hated a woman, but he hated her. Every time he saw her, he could not help but think of his fate of being schemed against. He could not help but feel angry. He had used all the cold words he had used on women in his life on her. Now that he saw her like this, a familiar feeling of irritation rose in his heart. He cursed under his breath and roughly shoved a pill in her mouth. However, she did not know how to swallow. Ji Yinhuang picked up the teapot beside him, but the water in the teapot had been emptied. He cursed under his breath again and lowered his head. He used his lips to block her lips and pried open her teeth. He pushed the pill to her throat, and with a swipe of his hand, the pill was successfully swallowed. Although Ji Yinhuang had already had intimate contact with her many times, he always went straight to the point. He had never kissed her and had never touched her lips at this moment. When he touched her hot yet soft lips, a strange feeling emerged in his heart. But soon after, an even deeper sense of powerlessness and disgust emerged. He quickly let go of her lips and helped her treat the wound on her hand to stop the blood flow. Because he was unwilling, his actions were not gentle and even somewhat rough. He could not help but hurt her. She groaned and opened her eyes. When she saw Ji Yinhuang, a faint light flickered in her eyes. She muttered, "Is this a dream?" Ji Yinhuang coldly glanced at her without saying a word. His pills were from the Sun Moon sect and had special effects. Her fever was subsiding, so she shouldn't die. The light in Tian Xueqing's eyes shifted slightly, and she finally realized that she was in Ji Yinhuang's carriage. She raised her hands, and when she saw that both of her hands were properly bandaged, the light in her eyes became even more intense. However, Ji Yinhuang was pierced by the light in her eyes. He coldly said, "Don't misunderstand. This prince's life is still tied to your body. Naturally, I can't let you die." Tian Xueqing's body stiffened and her eyes dimmed. She smiled and said, "Xueqing understands." She laughed sarcastically. "That's why I have to keep Xueqing alive no matter what. I still want to be your crown princess, because no matter how much you hate me, you can't leave me." Ji Yinhuang, he clenched his fists. "You? What about me?" The smile on Tian Xueqing's face deepened. "Did I tell you the truth? Your Highness, since you know that my life is so important, please don't leave me behind so easily in the future." Ji Yinhuang was so angry that his face turned green. "You got injured on purpose." Chapter 966. Tian Shueqing was stunned, and pain flashed through her eyes. However, she raised her head and smiled. Yes, I did it on purpose. Ji Huang was choked by her words, and after a long while, he coldly laughed. Tian Shueqing, you've probably misunderstood. This prince indeed cannot let you die, but I have 10,000 ways to make you beg for death, unable to die. You may be the crown prince's wife, but don't even think about getting any favor from me. Tian Shueqing's face was pale, but she still smiled lightly. I only covet your position as the crown prince's wife. Why would I want your favor? Ji Huang, Tian Shueqing, you will pay the price for what you have done. Tian Shueqing closed her eyes slightly. Her chest felt as if it was drowning in water. The price? She had already paid the price, and it was impossible to take it back. The two of them stopped talking. The golden-winged roc carried them and flew into the distance, into the unknown future. Ning Xuema was extremely regretful. She regretted listening to Kirin's words. Kirin's flying speed was indeed extremely fast. It was comparable to a jet, and its speed was as fast as 1,000 miles per hour. However, Kirin did not know how to set up a wind barrier. Ning Xuema's defensive technique could be easily blocked if she was riding on an ordinary bird. But on the little Qilin's back, which was so fast, her defensive technique was obviously not enough. One could imagine the feeling of flying on a plane without a cabin. The oncoming hurricane could almost cut a person into pieces. Fortunately, Ning Xuema's clothes were specially made and were imbued with the ancestors' psychokinesis, so they wouldn't be torn or blown away by the wind. Otherwise, this hurricane would definitely rip her clothes apart and make her run around naked. The wind made it difficult for her to open her mouth and eyes. She desperately used her psychokinesis to protect herself, but her face and body were still in pain. At such an extreme speed, not only was the wind strong, it was also very cold. She only felt that the heat in her body was rapidly disappearing, and her hand that was holding the Kirin horn was so cold that she could barely feel it. After all, Kirin was a divine beast, and its skin was naturally resistant to the wind, so it didn't feel much discomfort. It flew happily in the air. This feeling of being able to completely let go was really good. Its flying skill was amazing. Master, how's my flight technique? Isn't it fast? Ha, Kirin said proudly. He was eagerly looking forward to being praised by his master. Because they were so close to each other, it spoke normally and did not use telepathy. Using that kind of spell would consume a little bit of telekinesis. Therefore, Kirin preferred to communicate with Ning Xuema normally when they could. Ning Xuema's mind was completely focused on resisting the heavenly wind. Her ears were filled with whistling sounds that tore through the air. Her ears were ringing so badly that she couldn't hear what the little Qilin was saying. Kirin asked twice but didn't get a response. He was a little puzzled, so he could only use telepathy. Master, can you hear me? Ning Xuema heard it this time, but she didn't have the energy to respond to it. She couldn't be distracted at all. Once she was distracted, she might be blown away by the wind. Damn it. If she had known it would be like this, she would have fastened a safety belt on Kirin. Kirin's body was covered with slippery scales. She could only rely on the Kirin horn to support herself while riding on its back. Chapter 9:67. Ning Xuema's wrist felt like it was going to break, but she didn't dare to relax. Kirin didn't get any response from her, so it was puzzled. In addition, she kept grabbing onto its horn, which made it uncomfortable. It couldn't help but ask again, Master, are you distracted again? Did you hear what I said? Master, don't grab my horn so tightly, it's hard for me to turn my head. Walk your ass. If you didn't grab onto its horn, I would have flown out. Ning Xuema wanted to bite this unreliable Kirin. Her wrist was so sore that it was about to fall off. It couldn't go on like this. She felt that she could only hold on for another 7 or 8 minutes. If Kirin didn't slow down, she would really fly out. Because the wind was too strong, she couldn't open her mouth. So she used telepathy and shouted, "Slow down." She only said a few words, but her body almost slipped out of the Kirin's back. It was the first time she swore in front of Kirin. Kirin was shocked and slowed down a little. Master, what's wrong? Didn't you say that we have to go as fast as possible? She did say that, but it was under the condition that she could save her life. Ning Xiumao was already uncomfortable because of the wind. Little Apple, didn't you learn how to defend against the wind? We don't need to defend against the wind when we fly. Kirin refuted. Our scales are the best protection. No matter how fast we fly, we won't feel uncomfortable. You don't need it, but what about your master? Doesn't your master need protection? Ning Xiumao almost wanted to pull its scales. Kirin rarely has a master. Those who can tame a Kirin are all above the heaven rank. Kirin said proudly. It was a child after all, so it said whatever it wanted to say. It seemed that she was still too weak. Ning Xiumao was speechless. Kirin was right. There weren't many people who could tame a Kirin in this world. She had gotten the little Qilin by accident. She needed to be stronger. Only then would he be worthy of being the master of Kirin. Kirin had slowed down a lot, and Ning Xiumao could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Kirin was worried. Master, we won't be able to reach Daliang City in a day if we're so slow. It was traveling at a speed of 200 miles per hour. While that was fast enough, it was obvious that it would not make it to Daliang City in time. Ning Xiumao inwardly sucked in a breath of air. She stretched her sore wrists on his back and steeled her heart. Go faster. Fly at full speed for an hour, then slow down to let me take a breather. Good. Hold on tight, master. Kirin was immediately energized. He sped up again and shot out like a cannonball. Just like that, Kirin alternated between going fast and going slow. After 6 hours, they had flown more than 2,000 miles. Those who had never experienced flying at full speed without any protection would not know how it felt. Ning Xiumao persevered for 6 hours. She felt as if all the bones in her body were going to fall apart. Her wrists were so sore that they were numb. It felt as if they were going to break. However, this was also a great training for her skills. As she had to withstand the bone-piercing cold wind, the fire psychokinesis in her body automatically circulated faster and faster. It also became more active. After 6 hours, it had improved to a new level. Although it had not leveled up, Ning Xiumao could already feel the increase in its power. Chapter 968. Sure enough, Kung Fu improved the fastest during hardships. During another round of rapid flight, Ning Xiumao also deliberately used her fire psychokinesis to make it flow in her body like a small stream. Wherever it passed, her skin was no longer so stiff and cold. While she was doing this, she suddenly felt a faint pain in her lower abdomen. It was so cold that she felt uncomfortable. Almost subconsciously, she used her fire psychokinesis to move to her lower abdomen. After she used it, she suddenly woke up. Oh no! Her lower abdomen could swallow her psychokinesis. Usually when she used her Kung Fu, she deliberately avoided that area because there was another channel for her psychokinesis to move through. Now, she was careless and used her psychokinesis to move in that direction. She hurriedly wanted to adjust it, but it was too late. The fire psychokinesis that was protecting her body had just reached her lower abdomen when it was sucked in like a dark whirlpool and disappeared in the blink of an eye. That place was simply like a black hole, sucking in all the fire willpower she had just cultivated like a whale sucking in a river. Ning Xiumao could not use any other psychokinesis to protect herself when her psychokinesis was suddenly sucked in. She immediately felt the wind cutting her. She almost couldn't breathe. Just at this moment, a speck of dust hit her finger in the air. Under normal circumstances, this speck of dust was naturally nothing. But when she was flying at such a high speed, this speck of dust was not inferior to a bullet, and it instantly cut her finger. Her whole palm was numb and painful, and she immediately let go of the Kirin horn. With a scream, her body flew out like a kite. She did not know how to fly, so when she fell off the Kirin's back, she immediately fell down like a meteor. She was finished. Kirin was flying a height of 3,000 to 4,000 meters. If she fell from such a height, she was afraid that she would fall into a pile of mud and could not be put away. Kirin was also scared out of its wits. but its speed was too fast, so it could not make a turn and could not rush down to rescue her in time. Just as Ning Xiumal was about to fall down, a white light suddenly flashed in front of her eyes. A gentle force abruptly turned her body, easily dispelling the force of her fall. Then, Ning Xiumal threw herself into a person's embrace. A familiar, faint fragrance lingered in her nose. Ning Xiumal was still in a state of shock. She hurriedly opened her eyes and looked at the person hugging her. Great God! The one who saved her in time was naturally Shan Jiuli. His bearing was very free and easy. He carried her and floated in the air. Not a single strand of his hair was out of place. He put her down and rubbed her messy hair. You seem to be addicted to falling from high altitudes. Aren't you afraid of being slapped into a meat patty? Ning Xiumal wanted to cry. Ever since she came to this time and space, she seemed to have fallen from the sky. She couldn't count the number of times she had fallen from a high altitude. She hugged his arm. Almighty, when are you going to teach me how to fly? She had to learn how to fly first, or she would fall to her death sooner or later. You want to learn how to fly before you learn how to run? Shan Jiuli glanced at her. Wait until you reach Earth rank level 6. She wanted to level up. Almighty, your appearance is like a timely rain. Ning Xiumal sighed. Of course it was timely. He had been following her and Kirin invisibly, afraid that something would happen to her. The corners of Shan Jiuli's lips curled up slightly as he said, I happened to be passing by and saved you. Passing by? Ning Xiumal looked at him. Where are you going? Chapter 969. Daliang City, Shan Jiuli said. Suddenly, he raised his hand and threw her out. Coincidentally, she landed on the little Qilin's back as it turned back. Ning Xiumal was shocked. She grabbed Kirin's horn tightly and turned to look at Shan Jiuli. The Almighty did it on purpose. She immediately smiled at Shan Jiuli, who was walking at the same speed as Kirin. What a coincidence, Almighty. I'm going to Daliang City too. Let's go together. Together? Shan Jiuli glanced at Kirin slowly and said, It's too slow, and I'm in a hurry. You can continue to walk with it. I'll go first. He made a gesture with his fingers, indicating that he was going to escape immediately. Ning Xiumal was anxious. Hey, Almighty, carry me. Shan Jiuli was unmoved. I see that you're riding on its back. It's fast and slow, and you can practice martial arts. You should go with it. No, I won't go with you. Ning Xiumal wanted to pull his sleeve. Shan Jiuli dodged to the side. No need. All right, I'll take my leave first. His figure flashed and turned into a shooting star in the sky. Then, he disappeared in the blink of an eye. Ning Xiumal was speechless. Was the Almighty jealous of Kirin? Wasn't he too vengeful? Kirin was excited. Master, should we go after him? Go after him? It would be strange if they could catch up with him. Ning Xiumal let Kirin fly forward and shouted, Almighty, bring me with you. I'll count to 10. If you don't come back, I'll jump. 1. Kirin was shocked. Master, you can't jump. You'll fall to your death. Ning Xiumal said, 2. Master, don't do anything stupid. He has already flown far away. He can't hear us. 3. Master, we could just walk a little slower. There's no need to be angry with him. 4. No matter what Kirin said, Ning Xiumal continued to count the numbers loudly. Finally, she counted to 10. The sky was filled with clouds and mist. Where was Shan Jiuli's shadow? He didn't even come back. The little Qilin hastily said, Didn't I say so? He's already far away. He won't be able to hear. Before it could finish its sentence, it suddenly felt the weight on its back lighten. Ning Xiumal had really jumped down. Master. The little Qilin shouted. Fortunately, it was flying slowly this time, so its forward inertia was not so strong. Fortunately, it was able to turn around in time. Kirin was about to dive down when it saw Shan Jiuli appear not far away. He raised his hand and caught its falling master in his arms. Kirin felt its little heart was about to jump out of its body because of its master. Well, Master won. Dizun really didn't go far. Master is too fierce. She dared to gamble. If Dizun didn't come back, wouldn't she really fall to her death? Shan Jiuli pulled her into his arms his face also unkind. Are you looking for death? Fortunately, he came back. Fortunately, he also didn't go far. Otherwise, he would have to summon her spirit. Ning Xiuma wrapped her arms around his neck, smiling. I knew you couldn't bear to part with me. I knew you would come back. What if I didn't come back? Shen Jiuli's tone was very unpleasant. No, you'll come back. Ning Xiuma was full of confidence. Her move seemed reckless, but in fact she was 99% sure it would work. Chapter 970. Ning Xiuma never fought an unprepared battle. Of course, she was 1% unsure, but as a secret agent, sometimes she had to take a gamble. If she was 99% sure, she would not let it go. Moreover, she did give him some time, so he did not count quickly. She was getting more and more unruly in front of him. Even someone as powerful as Shen Jiuli felt helpless facing her. He glanced at her. Where is your integrity? She was now sticking to him like a dogskin plaster. She no longer kept a little distance from him as she had in the past. It's gone. Ning Xiuma answered without hesitation and hugged his arm instead. Guru, Kiran is too unreliable. You should bring me to Daliang City. It's on the way anyway. Shen Jiuli was a little dazed. The way she hugged him gave him a sense of déjà vu. It was as if she used to stay by his side like this many years ago, and she used to be so shameless. If Kiran is reliable, you won't pester me anymore, right? Shen Jiuli looked down at her doubtfully. Why would I? I trust the Guru more. Ning Xiuma's tone was firm. She thought that if she did not suffer so much on Kiran's back, she might still want him to carry her, but she would not take the risk. Shen Jiuli's eyes moved slightly, and his gaze softened. It was not easy to gain her trust. God knows how much effort he had put in to make her trust him again. However, he did not plan to let her go. Why did you leave without saying goodbye? Ning Xiuma widened her eyes. I left a letter. She did not leave without saying goodbye, right? Why didn't you tell me face to face? Shen Jiuli asked in a different way. You were practicing martial arts at that time, and my matter was very urgent. I did not want to disturb you, as I was afraid that you would go crazy. Ning Xiuma explained. So that was the reason. Shen Jiuli's faintly unhappy heart finally flew away. He looked at her hair that was blown around like a madwoman by the wind, and then looked at her small hand that was cut by the wind. He sighed softly, pulled her down, and placed her on the cloud under his feet. Stand properly. Could this smoke-like cloud really stand? Ning Xiuma was very suspicious of this. She subconsciously grabbed a corner of his sleeve. You won't fall, will you? With me here, what are you afraid of? Shen Jiuli simply pulled out his sleeve and glanced at her appearance with disdain. You're as dirty as a beggar now. How can you be my disciple like this? Ning Xiuma stood on his cloud for a moment, trembling in fear. Although the cloud was soft, it felt very firm under her feet. It seemed that he had used a spell to condense it. She was finally relieved. She used her hands to tidy up her messy hair. I'm at most messy, not dirty. Her hand was caught by Shen Jiuli. He took out a bottle of ointment from nowhere and applied it on the wound on her hand. The ointment was a little like alcohol. Although it was cool, it was also a little stinging. It hurts, it hurts, it hurts. Ning Xiuma shouted unceremoniously. She hurriedly pulled her hand back. But how could she pull her hand back when he was holding it? If you know it hurts, don't take risks. I can't always save you in time. Shen Jiuli unceremoniously applied another layer of ointment on her wound. He was a little angry at her recklessness. Chapter 971. I didn't take any risks. I only did it because I was confident, Ning Xiuma retorted. I didn't mean that you jumped down on purpose. You didn't know that I was beside you just now. How did you fall down from Kylan's back? Shen Jiuli was scared when he thought about it. This girl's little life seemed to be hanging on a thin line, and she could lose it at any time. Ning Xiuma also remembered that her psychokinesis was swallowed. Her energy center was too strange. It swallowed her psychokinesis without any hesitation. My psychokinesis went to my energy center by mistake and was swallowed. Ning Xiuma was distressed. Your psychokinesis was swallowed? It was the first time that Shen Jiuli heard mention this. He raised his eyebrows and looked at her. What do you mean? My body's dantian is a little strange. The moment the psychokinesis that I cultivate reaches this place, it will be swallowed up. Usually, when I cultivate, I will go around this place and find another channel. Great God! Tell me, what's wrong with my dantian? Is there a little monster that specializes in absorbing psychokinesis? Shinjuli's eyes flashed slightly. He raised his hand and held her wrist. Take my psychokinesis to your energy center. He passed his psychokinesis through her wrist. Ning Shuma was still a little worried. Guru, if your psychokinesis is swallowed, will we fall from this cloud again? If we fall, I'll be your scapegoat. What are you afraid of? Shinjuli said bluntly. Quickly, Ning Shuma had to use her psychokinesis and carefully move Shinjuli's psychokinesis toward her energy center. A moment later, her and his psychokinesis made a circle in his dantian and passed through safely. Passed. It was not swallowed. There were no signs of being swallowed at all. There was nothing unusual in her energy center. The black hole-like existence seemed to have disappeared into thin air. How could it be? Could it be that her energy center was also a bully? Were they afraid of the Almighty's telekinesis? You don't dare to do anything funny anymore. Ning Shuama couldn't figure it out. Unwilling to give up, she took the Almighty's psychokinesis and circled around her dantian a few times. Her dantian didn't move at all. In the end, she gave up and stopped. She couldn't help but explain to him, Great God, I really didn't lie to you. My dantian does have the devouring power. I've tested it many times, and it works every time. There has never been an accident. When Crown Prince Jian Huang was treating my injuries, he had also detected it and almost swallowed his psychokinesis. Shun Jili retracted his hand and looked at her. His eyes flickered slightly, but he did not say anything. Did he still think that he was lying? Ning Shuama couldn't help but say, as the saying goes, even ghosts are afraid of evil people. Is it because you're too evil? So Shun Jili pursed his thin lips and raised his hand to knock her. If I were evil, would I allow a little girl like you to be so presumptuous in front of me? Then do you trust me? I do. I do. Shinjuli answered simply. Ning Shuama's heart relaxed, and she was touched. This matter was so strange. If she didn't experience it personally, she wouldn't believe it even if someone else told her. But he believed her. She opened her mouth to say something, but Shun Juli added, Ji and Huang treated your injuries? What injuries? How did he treat them? Ning Shuama was speechless. That was when she was injured by Ji Yunhao's soul-searching whip. Chapter 972. When Jian Huang was treating her injuries in the palace, she had exposed her entire back in front of him. Although it was nothing to show her back in front of man for treatment, she was a magnanimous gentleman. However, if she said it out loud, the Almighty might get jealous. She didn't know what the Almighty would do if he got jealous, so Ning Shuama smiled vaguely. Haha, it's just a small injury. It's okay. Small injury? Do you need him to use his psychokinesis to treat a small injury? When his psychokinesis entered your energy center, it should be to push your blood through the palace. When his psychokinesis passed through your energy center, he was able to stop it in time when it was being devoured. This proves that his psychokinesis entered through the Tianshu acupoint on your back. You should be injured on your back at that time. Shun Jili deduced step by step and said it almost exactly. Ning Shuama was speechless. The Almighty's deductive ability was too abnormal. He said it as if he had seen it himself. Shun Juli's palm landed on her back, and he squinted his eyes slightly. He saw your back. His voice was cold and eerie, and Ning Shuama felt goosebumps all over her body. She laughed again. Almighty, it was an emergency at that time, so I just let him see a little bit. Well, in our era, it was actually quite normal for a woman to show her back. There were backless outfits inside the gown, and no one cared about it. Her explanation was worse than not explaining at all. Shun Juli's expression became even worse. You've worn backless outfits before? How many people have you shown it to? Of course, she had worn it before. As a qualified agent, in order to get the information she wanted, she would naturally attend all kinds of banquets. She had even pretended to be a prostitute to socialize with others. Not to mention her backless. Even her cleavage was exposed before. However, she definitely couldn't let the Almighty know about this, so Ning Xiuma immediately shook her head firmly. No. Shen Julie looked in her eyes. You really didn't? I really didn't. Ning Xiuma vowed solemnly. Sometimes, lying was a common thing for her. Shen Julie finally stopped pursuing her. He took out a comb and combed her messy hair. You don't dare to lie to me. Ning Xiuma coughed secretly. A white lie that didn't affect the overall situation shouldn't count as cheating, right? Guru, since you already knew that Yan Ziyuan was crazy enough to save Yifeng, you should know that she still has feelings for Yifeng. Now that she suddenly got married, there must be something fishy about it, but you didn't say anything. Ning Xiuma began to change the topic and settle accounts with him. No matter what, it has nothing to do with me. Shun Julie's voice was still indifferent. That's right. How could she forget that the Almighty wasn't a busybody? Guru, Yan Ziyuan and Yifeng are both my friends. I don't want them to regret it for the rest of their lives, so I must investigate this matter thoroughly. If Yan Ziyuan was willing, then I have nothing to say. If she was forced, then I might have to interfere. Ning Xiuma's tone was full of determination. Shun Julie's fingers that were combing her hair paused for a moment. After a while, he slowly said, Yifeng and Yanzhen are destined not to be fated. Why do you have to interfere? What do you mean by destined? I don't believe in fate. Ning Xiumo raised her head. My fate is up to me, not the heavens. When she said this, her eyes were shining, filled with invisible determination and dominance. She had never believed in fate. She had always relied on her own abilities to fight against fate. Chapter 973. Maybe 30% of it was fate, but 70% of it depended on her own efforts. If she didn't fight for it, she would never get what she wanted. She wasn't someone who would go with the flow and submit to fate. Shun Julie let out a rare laugh. Good, you're ambitious. Ning Xiuma had never heard him laugh before, so she couldn't help but look back. The Almighty was so beautiful when he laughed, as if countless flowers were falling with his laughter. She was stunned for a moment. Once Shun Julie revealed his true colors, many people would be stunned. When others were stunned, he only felt annoyed, so he wore a mask all year round. But Ning Xiumo was stunned, and he only felt happy. He lowered his head and kissed her slightly open mouth. Are you stunned? Almighty, you look so good when you laugh. You should smile more. Ning Xiumo couldn't help but suggest. One smile could overturn a city, and 2 smiles could overturn a country. This was referring to him. In your eyes, I'm beautiful? Shun Julie remained calm. Ning Xiumo nodded generously and praised him generously. Beautiful. Then, compared to that Stallone, he didn't forget that her idol was that muscular man. Yeah, how did he know that her idol was Stallone? She thought for a moment. I think you're as beautiful as him. Shun Julie's face didn't look good. He had seen Stallone's appearance in her illusion, and in his eyes, he was a boorish man. Shun Julie's appearance was far better than Stallone's. This little girl was good at everything, but her sense of beauty was a bit strange. He was too lazy to argue with her. At least in her heart, he was comparable to her idol, which was a big improvement. He quickly combed her messy hair and used a cleansing spell on her body. Then, he helped her tidy up her messy dress. Thus, Ning Xiumo once again became beautiful and was no longer in a sorry state. Ning Xiumo took the mirror that the Almighty handed to her and looked at herself. She nodded in satisfaction. The Almighty was so skillful with his hands. The way he styled her hair was simply too beautiful. She looked beautiful and playful, which was in line with her usual style. Was the Almighty's ability to comb his hair innate? He didn't look like a novice. There seemed to be a messy image flashing through her mind. Supreme Divinity, can you help me comb my hair? No, Aya, you're so capable. You'll be able to learn it quickly. Help me comb it. Are you my maid? Or am I your servant? Of course I'm your maidservant. But if your maidservant goes out with a messy hairstyle, won't it be embarrassing for you? An inexplicable conversation that seemed to have crossed thousands of cliffs and tens of thousands of ravines, traversed mountains, and waded through rivers to arrive at Ning Xiumo's mind. She couldn't help but be startled. She frowned and was about to think carefully, but the voice disappeared in her mind again. She couldn't find it. Shun, Julie pressed her shoulder. What are you daydreaming about again? Ning Xiuma turned around and hugged his hand. She blurted out, Almighty, did we know each other before? Why do you ask? Shun Julie turned her around and combed her bangs. I don't know why, but I feel that we used to know each other before. She couldn't help but think of Baoyu's words to Daiyu and dream of the Red Chamber. I've seen this sister before. She was also embarrassed. She was from the modern era, so how could she have known the Almighty before? Chapter 974. This thought of hers was rather nonsensical. So after Ning Xiuma casually asked this question, she threw this thought to the back of her mind. Shun Julie's expression changed slightly. After seeing her grow up, he also had an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Was this fate? Or was it a coincidence? He didn't say anything, so Ning Xiuma didn't ask anymore. She occasionally turned her head and saw the white cloud beside her fly past her like a whirlwind. In the blink of an eye, it was far behind her. God, this speed! It was much faster than Kieran's top speed. The Almighty was indeed the Almighty. He chatted with her and even did her hair for her. He could even do it so quickly. What was even rarer was that she couldn't feel any wind or even any vibration. She almost suspected that if she put a cup of water on the cloud, it wouldn't spill out. She looked around again and didn't see Kieran's shadow. He must have been left far behind by the Almighty. This kind of ability was indeed a little abnormal. No wonder he could surpass everyone. He really had the ability. Great God, when will I be able to cultivate to the same level as you? Ning Xiuma felt envious. Work hard. Shun Julie hugged her as they sat on the cloud and watched the clouds move. At least cultivate to Earth rank level 8 as soon as possible. He added this sentence in his heart. He didn't want to think about his previous life. He only wanted to grasp the present. He only wanted to hold her in his arms. Ning Xiuma was faintly sleepy in his arms. She really didn't have much time to rest recently. Sleep if you're sleepy. I'll wake you up when we arrive. Shun Julie's fingers played with her eyelashes. Oh, it was rare for her to be so obedient. She arched in his arms and fell asleep without worry. The red wedding dress was neatly folded on the spring stool. There was a phoenix coronet on it. The coronet was inlaid with various gems that sparkled brightly. Yen Ziyuan sat in front of the dressing table and looked at the reflection in the mirror. She was lost in thought. Miss, this is the wedding dress that Master sent 100 top embroiderers to prepare for you. Do you like it? Sure. The little maid beside her was full of joy. Do you like it? Yen Ziyuan raised her hand to touch the fabric of the wedding dress. The smooth fabric was as soft as water in her palm. She should like it, right? She was finally going to marry the man she liked. How could she not like it? She had been looking forward to this day, even in her dreams. Tomorrow, she would be able to wear this phoenix coronet and robe and become the bride of her beloved. She should be very happy, but she felt like she had lost something in her heart, and she was a little distracted. As the day of the wedding approached, she was even a little scared and had a desire to escape. Miss, you seem a little unhappy? Sure, he was keenly aware of her mood. He thought for a moment and said, Miss, you don't have to worry about Rongyan. She would only be married in 3 days, and Child Gu would only take her as a concubine. She wouldn't even be considered a co-wife. No matter what, she is still below you. When she enters the door, she has to kowtow to you and offer you tea. Yen Ziyuan's fingers froze on the wedding dress. She slowly withdrew her hand. Yes, Gu Ziyan had told her that he owed Rongyan's father a favor. He had promised Rongyan's father that he would take care of her for the rest of her life. In other words, he had to marry Rongyan. Of course, that day, Gu Ziyan also said that the one he liked the most was Yen Ziyuan, so he wanted to marry her as his wife. As for Rongyan, he could only pity her and take her as his concubine. Chapter 975. He said that he would only marry the 2 of them in this lifetime and would not marry a 3rd one. He told her not to worry. Being able to marry Gu Ziyan was something that she had longed for even in her dreams. Unfortunately, the falling flower had always been the heartless brook. Gu Ziyan had always been cold to her. She really did not expect that after a zither recital, Gu Xian's attitude towards her would suddenly change so much that he would personally propose marriage. Although Gu Xian was born poor, he had used his abilities to earn a lot of money for his family. Although proposing marriage to the daughter of the city's governor was out of his league, it would not be a disgrace to her. Not to mention that Yin Ziyuan was very willing, so City Lord Yin agreed without hesitation. The marriage was set. After Yin Ziyuan agreed, Gu Xian seemed to be afraid that she would change her mind and sent people to set the wedding date. From the proposal to the wedding, there was only half a month's time. Yin Ziyuan really felt that it was a bit rushed, but since she was marrying her sweetheart, it did not matter how rushed it was. In this half a month, Daliang City was full of joy. Everyone knew that the governor's beloved daughter was about to get married. The Yin residence was unusually busy. Yin Zian was dragged by people every day to either get her clothes measured or try on various accessories. She was so busy that she did not have any free time. However, in the midst of the joy, she was always a little distracted. She always felt like she had forgotten something and would occasionally feel inexplicably anxious and depressed. She had also asked her wet nurse for advice. Her wet nurse told her that this was a normal emotion for a girl before marriage and that there was no need to take it to heart. She also felt that she probably minded that Gu Xian still wanted to take Rong Yin as a concubine, so she would occasionally feel uncomfortable. Forget it, being able to marry him was already a rare blessing for her. If he wanted to take another concubine, she could only endure it. At most, after marriage, she and that woman would mind their own business. Miss, that day on the ship, the only reason you were able to escape was all thanks to Child Gu's bravery. I heard that Child Gu was injured because of that incident. It can be seen that he still has you in his heart, so you don't have to mind that woman, Rong Yin. Shi'er chattered on. On a boat? Yin Ziyuan rubbed her forehead. Just as he was about to say something, the candlelight in the room suddenly dimmed, and a figure appeared out of thin air. Shi'er was shocked. She opened her mouth and was about to shout assassin. But before she could even open her mouth, that person pointed at her out of thin air. Her vision turned black, and she fell limply onto the chair and fainted. Yin Ziyuan was also shocked, but after seeing who it was, she blurted out, "Shue shue." It was Ning Xiuema. The great god's speed was very fast, and he arrived at Daliang City when the sky turned dark. Ning Xiuema first asked around in the city, and all she heard was that Miss Yin was getting married. As expected, Yin Ziyuan was going to marry Gu Xian. Tomorrow was the day of their wedding. When the people in the city talked about the two of them, they were full of praises, saying that they were a match made in heaven. Ning Xiuema had heard too many of these words in the past 2 hours. She did not manage to find out any valuable information. However, she heard from the people that they occasionally saw Miss Yin go out, and they saw that she was always beaming and very happy. From what the people said, Yin Ziyuan did not seem to be forced into this marriage. Shun Jili had been by her side the whole time. Of course, when he appeared, he was using the identity of Han Shanwei. He used a spell to blur his face, so no one could see his face clearly. Chapter 976. Of course, this did not include Ning Xiuema. She could still see him very clearly. The Almighty was born with an aura that kept people away. Although people were very curious about him, they did not dare to get close to him. Even when he was around, people did not even dare to speak loudly and automatically kept quiet. Because of this, Ning Xiuema did not hear a lot of gossip. What she needed to hear the most now was gossip. Many truths were hidden in gossip. Therefore, after Ning Xiuema wandered around the streets without any results, she decided to look for Yin Ziyuan directly. Only by looking at the person involved could she determine what went wrong. The Almighty's aura was too cold. Ning Xiuema was afraid that he would startle Yin Ziyuan, so she asked the Almighty to hide himself temporarily and let her appear alone. At that time, the Almighty seemed to be a little unhappy. She went to see her good friend, but hid him as if he could not be seen. Ning Xiuan probably sensed the Almighty's unhappiness, so she coaxed him, "Almighty, your aura is too strong. I'm afraid that any woman who sees you will go crazy." Ahem, even her best friends are no exception. Isn't there a saying, guard against fire, theft, and best friends? What if my best friend falls in love with you too? I don't want to be stolen away. Her nonsense worked a lot on Shunjiuli. He rubbed her head and smiled. What you mean is, have you fallen in love with me too? Don't worry, although there are many women who like me, you are the only one. After saying this, he left contentedly. After Ning Xiuma entered Yan Ziyuan's house, she saw him sitting in the hall opposite. He rested his chin on his hand and looked like he was watching a show. Of course, he was invisible, and only she could see him. The teams of night patrollers who occasionally flashed by below would not be able to see him. Shwe shwe, you're finally out of danger? That was filtered out by evil people. I have been very worried. Father also sent many soldiers out, but there has been no news. Was it Heavenly Master who saved you and brought you back? Yan Ziyuan pulled Ning Xiuma's hand and chatted with her like a bamboo tube pouring beans. Her concern was evident in her words. Ning Xiuma's heart sank. She had suspected that Yan Ziyuan had amnesia, but now it didn't seem like it. Was she really willing to marry Gu Ziyan? She congratulated Yan Ziyuan and briefly told her how she got out of her predicament. Of course, she emphasized Yifeng. As she spoke, she secretly observed Yan Ziyuan's expression. When Yan Ziyuan heard Yifeng's name, she frowned slightly and said, "So he's also out of danger." Then, she didn't mention it again. Her expression was as if Yifeng was just a normal person and her secret guard. She didn't seem to be particularly concerned about him and couldn't see any abnormalities. Back on the ship, Ning Xiuma was detained by Shuilan. She couldn't see the situation outside, so she didn't know about the interaction between Yan Ziyuan and Yifeng. She also didn't know about their subsequent development. When she was with Yan Ziyuan, she saw Yan Ziyuan's feelings for Gu Ziyan. Even a blind person could see that Yan Ziyuan liked Gu Ziyan. So at this moment, even after analyzing in her heart, Ning Xiuma didn't feel that there was anything strange about Yan Ziyuan marrying Gu Ziyan. She chatted with Yan Ziyuan for a while. After beating around the bush for a long time, she didn't find anything wrong. Instead, she found out some inside information about Yi Feng's visit to the Yin Manor 3 years ago. Chapter 977. It was said that Yi Feng had asked City Lord Yin to be Yan Ziyuan's personal bodyguard the moment he arrived. Because City Lord Yin didn't know his background, he didn't dare to agree. Yi Feng forced City Lord Yin to eat a type of poison and threatened to give him the antidote every 6 months. Finally, he achieved his goal. These 3 years, City Lord Yin lived in fear, afraid that he would harm his daughter. This time, after Yi Feng's accident, Yan Ziyuan returned home and City Lord Yin told her the truth. Only then did Yan Ziyuan know that her father had been threatened with drugs for 3 years. When Yan Ziyuan and Ning Xiuma talked about this matter, there was a sense of disgust towards Yi Feng in her words, which made Ning Xiuma speechless. Thinking about how Yi Feng had risked his life to protect her in exchange for this result, Ning Xiuma also felt a bit sad. In love, it wasn't about who sacrificed more for the other party to win love. From ancient times until now, the most heartbreaking thing was this kind of unrequited love. No matter how much Yi Feng sacrificed for Yan Ziyuan, if she didn't like him, there was nothing he could do. There was no reason to say anything. However, when Ning Xiuma heard the disgust towards Yi Feng in Yan Ziyuan's tone, she still felt a bit uncomfortable. She felt that it was unfair for Yi Feng. Thus, she said a few words for Yi Feng. Ever since Yi Feng became your bodyguard, has he ever harmed you in the slightest? Has he ever tried to harm you? Yan Ziyuan was stunned. She thought for a moment and shook her head. No. After a short pause, she said, "But he used drugs to control my father. Perhaps he had no other choice." Is there anything wrong with City Lord Yan's body? Ning Xiuma's expression was serious. Yan Ziyuan paused for a moment, then shook her head. Father's spirit has always been very good, but this is only because Father agreed to his conditions, and he gave him the antidote in time. If you don't agree, the consequences will be unimaginable. Ning Xiuma couldn't help but smile. Ziyuan, any poison in this world is harmful to the human body. Even if the antidote is given in time, it will still cause some irreversible damage. It's impossible for people to not notice it, and your father is still hale and hearty. This only proves that he hasn't been poisoned. The medicine that Yifeng gave him might not be poison. It might just be some ordinary nutritional medicine that he used to scare your father. Ning Xiuma had seen City Lord Yin before. That person walked with vigor, and he was in good spirits. How is it possible that he was poisoned? Ning Xiuma was a famous doctor. After all, so she could tell. It didn't matter if Yin Ziyuan didn't love Yifeng, but Ning Xiuma didn't want Yin Ziyuan to continue misunderstanding Yifeng. Yin Ziyuan was clearly shaken by this explanation. She stared blankly for a while before finally letting out a long sigh. I hope so. I was worried about my father's antidote in half a year, but it seems that I don't have to worry about it anymore. But I don't understand. Why did Yifeng do this? We didn't even know each other 3 years ago. So why did he scheme to become my personal hidden guard? Ning Xiuma sighed. Because in your previous life, you were his younger sister. She originally wanted to say his sweetheart, but then she remembered that Yin Ziyuan was about to get married, and that it wouldn't be appropriate to talk about Yifeng's deep love for her. So she changed her words at the last minute. Yin Ziyuan's eyes widened. What do you mean? Ning Xiuma told her what she heard from Yifeng about the entanglement between him and Yin Ziyuan in their previous life. Chapter 978. Ning Xiuma told her what she had heard from Yifeng about the entanglement between him and Yin Ziyuan in their previous lives. Yin Ziyuan looked as if she was listening to a heavenly book. After listening to Ning Xiuma's words, she paused for a moment and her face turned slightly red. So, I fell in love with Mr. Gu in my previous life. For him, I didn't hesitate to suffer the pain of having my legs separated. Ning Xiuma. A woman in love is really scary. Her focus is always on her lover. What do you think of Yifeng in your previous life? Ning Xiuma asked what she wanted to know. Yin Ziyuan lowered her eyes slightly and muttered to herself for a moment. Then, she said faintly, Yifeng is a good brother. He has done enough for me at that time, and I am grateful to him. However, the previous life is the previous life, and this life is this life. In this life, he and I are of different races. I only hope that he will not disturb me again. At this point, Ning Xiuma had nothing else to say. She chatted with Yin Ziyuan for a while longer before she left. Before she left, Ning Xiuma did not forget to unseal Shi-Er's acupoints and return everything to normal. She flew out and met up with Shun Jili. How is it? Shun Jili pulled her to sit on the roof. Ning Xiuma shook her head. She is willing. I can't see anything strange. Shun Jili's eyes flashed slightly. He held her hand and said, Since that is the case, you can let go. Let's go. Ning Xiuma thought for a moment. Wait. She glanced at a dark corner and paused for a moment. Then, she waved her hand in that direction. A moment later, a man in black who almost blended into the night appeared in front of Ning Xiuma. Nimble movements and a handsome face. It was Yifeng, whom she had not seen for several days. He was much thinner than before, and his face was as pale as snow. He cupped his hands towards Ning Xiuma and said, Thank you, Miss Ning. He knew that Ning Xiuma had come for him. He had also heard the conversation between her and Yin Ziyuan in the room. Ning Xiuma looked at him. Have you been by her side all this time? Yifeng pursed his lips and did not answer. Ning Xiuma couldn't help but sigh. Yifeng, I think it's time for you to let go. Sometimes letting go was a form of fulfillment, and it was also an expression of love. Otherwise, it would only cause more trouble for the other party. Yifeng slightly lowered his eyes. I will let go after she obtains true happiness. His tone was firm, but his voice was slightly trembling. He let go of his hands to fulfill her happiness. But who would fulfill his happiness? Ning Xiuma saw him like this and felt a little sad. She couldn't bear to see him like this, so she pointed outside. Yifeng, we haven't seen each other in a long time. Why don't you go out for a drink with me? That day, it was Yifeng who helped her walk out of the shadow of her fear of water. Now, she also wanted to talk to him. Yifeng naturally understood her thoughts. He slightly shook his head. Xiuma, thank you for your kindness, but I can't go. Ning Xiuma raised her eyebrows. Why? Yifeng looked back at Yin Ziyuan's room. She will get married tomorrow. I will guard her for one more night. After tonight, he would silently leave. From now on, the world would be his home. He would wander the world and never return to this sad place. He would only bless her from afar and would not cause her any more trouble. Ning Xuema heard him say this and did not want to force him. She sighed and was about to say goodbye when Shun Julie, who had been invisible, suddenly appeared and said lightly, "There is something strange about this." Chapter 979. His sudden appearance startled Yifeng. He took a step back and asked, "You are Mr. Han?" Shun Julie was currently wearing Han Shanyue's attire. Yifeng had seen him from afar before, so he recognized him. Shun Julie glanced at him and grunted in response. Ning Xuema immediately grabbed his sleeve and asked, "Guru, what's so strange about this?" She had been talking with Yin Ziyuan for so long, but she didn't find anything strange. How did the guru find out? Shun Julie was very satisfied with her body language, but he obviously didn't want to talk here. "Let's find a place to talk." He looked at Yifeng again and said, "If this is the result you want, then you can wait here for a night." Yifeng didn't know what he was trying to do, but it gave him a glimmer of hope. He took a deep breath and said, "There's a tea house in the city. It's quiet and elegant. It's a good place to talk." Shun Julie nodded slightly and said, "Let's go there." Ning Xuema couldn't help but glance at Shun Julie. The guru was indeed the guru. He managed to trick people into drinking tea with just one sentence. The three of them left quickly, without alerting anyone in the Yin residence. Inside the room, Yin Ziyuan didn't hear anything outside. After sending Ning Xuema away, she sat at the table in a daze for a moment. These days, no one mentioned anything about Yifeng to her. She just subconsciously felt that she hated him. Especially after hearing about her father, her disgust for him doubled. This time, Ning Xuema's words made her understand some things. She felt that her hatred for Yifeng didn't change much, but she didn't know why. But when she heard his name, her heart ached. Especially after Ning Xuema told her about her past life, she felt even more upset. An inexplicable bitterness surged in her chest. It made it hard for her to calm down. Her fingers once again stroked the wedding dress and phoenix coronet. Tomorrow, she would be Xian's bride. Being able to marry big brother Xian was the greatest happiness in her life. As for other people, it was better not to think about them. At the same time, inside the Gu mansion, there was a big red 11 character, a big red lantern, and an endless stream of servants and officers. The entire Gu mansion was preparing for the wedding tomorrow. It was destined to be a sleepless night. Gu Xian sat alone in the bridal chamber. He touched the quilt on the bed, and then touched the curtains of the bed. Tomorrow, he would be able to marry her. He would finally be able to have her. He only knew the pain when he lost her. After she resolutely let go, he realized that he actually loved her and had always liked her. He thought that he had no fate with her in this life, but he never thought that there would be a day when he would see the light at the end of the tunnel. Tomorrow, she would go through the wedding ceremony with him. She would sit on the wedding bed, waiting for him to remove her veil, drink wine with him, let him take off her hairpin, hold her hair with him, and enjoy the pleasure of being intimate with him on this bed. He would be gentle with her, pamper her, love her, and make her heart return to him. "Young master, Miss Rong Yen is here," a servant outside reported. Gu Xian woke up from his daydream and slightly frowned. What is she doing here? After thinking about it, he still walked out. The wedding hall had already been decorated beautifully and magnificently. Although Gu Xian wasn't from a rich family, Mayor Yen was. He didn't want his daughter to marry in a shabby manner, so he secretly sent Gu Xian a batch of silver to make sure that the wedding ceremony was beautiful and grand. Chapter 980. Gu Xian naturally also wanted to give Yin Ziyuan the most unforgettable wedding. He initially felt that he had lost face and didn't want to accept the money sent by his future father-in-law, but Lord Yan's words made him change his mind. Ziyuan will recover in the future. At that time, although what's done can't be undone, if your wedding is too shabby, it will inevitably make her feel worse. It's better to do your best to make it grand. First, it won't be a disgrace to her. Second, When she recovers, she will think of the wedding you prepared for her today and know that you are full of feelings for her. Her heart will be a lot better. She loves you, and it will be easy for her to fall in love with you again in the future. It was these words that made Gu Zian harden his heart and accept the money from his future father-in-law. He would do everything he could to make a big deal out of it. Of course, he also wanted to save face. He didn't want to be laughed at for living off a woman, so he wrote an IOU to his father-in-law. In the future, he will have to pay back the money. Lord Yin knew that his future son-in-law was proud and arrogant, so he accepted the IOU. In his heart, he planned to prepare more dowry for his daughter, so that his daughter won't suffer when she marries him. As for Gu Zian having to take Rong Yin as a concubine, Lord Yin didn't think it was a big deal. After all, which man doesn't have 3 wives and 4 concubines? What's more, this Rong Yin is his adopted daughter. As long as his baby daughter becomes the legal wife, he can be relieved of one of his worries. Because the father-in-law and son-in-law reached an agreement, the wedding was exceptionally grand. From the layout of the wedding hall, to the arrangement of the wedding procession, to the printing of the invitations, every process strived to be perfect and luxurious. For example, the wedding hall at the moment was decorated magnificently, comparable to a luxurious palace. At the moment, Rong Yin was standing in the wedding hall. Her eyes were filled with anger and envy. When Gu Zian came, she rushed over with grievance. "Brother Zian." Gu Zian faintly frowned and supported her. "What's wrong?" Rong Yin looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Brother Zian, in 3 days, Rong Yin also wants to have a wedding like this." Gu Zian frowned. "Nonsense." Taking a concubine was just a matter of carrying a small sedan chair over. At most, they would perform the ceremony in the side hall, and that would be giving her enough face. She still wanted the same wedding ceremony? How could this be? "Brother Zian, this is unfair to Rong Yin." Rong Yan's tears immediately fell. If my father was still alive, he would never let his daughter suffer such grievances. Gu Zian was annoyed by her crying, but he couldn't scold her. He could only coax her with a soft voice. "Rong Yin, there is no concubine in this world. People will criticize you. In fact, the wedding is just a formality. The most important thing is the husband's love for you. After you marry me, I will spoil you as much as I spoil her. I won't let you suffer too much, but in 3 days, Rong Yin will have to kneel down and offer tea to her. I'm not willing, it's just a kneel, that's all." Ziyuan is a woman with a strong sense of righteousness. She won't let you suffer too much, and she won't embarrass you either. At most, you can kneel to her when you marry into the family. You don't have to do that in the future. You two are sisters, and in the future, you should live in harmony with each other in the Gu residence. Rong Yin pulled his sleeve. "Brother Zian, in the future, I want to be your co-wife. I don't want to be suppressed by her." At this time, Gu Zian only wanted to coax her away. "We'll talk about this later. In short, in the future, I won't let you suffer." Chapter 981. 3 days later, even if it's not the same wedding, I still want to go through the wedding ceremony with Brother Zian. Otherwise, I will be looked down upon. Rong Yin continued to raise conditions. Gu Zian pondered for a moment. "Good." He and she will go through the wedding ceremony in the side hall. It's not worth anything. Just as he finished the word "good," he suddenly seemed to be aware of something. He turned his head to look outside, and then his body stiffened. Yan Ziyuan was standing at the entrance, looking at them in a daze. Her face was slightly pale, and her red lips were tightly pursed. Obviously, she heard the conversation between Gu Zian and Rong Yin. Gu Zian's heart sank. "Ziyuan, why are you here?" He was about to walk over quickly. Rong Yin threw herself into his arms, hugging his waist. "Zian Gij, I'm a little dizzy." She looked like she would fall down at any time. Gu Zian had no choice but to support her. "You are fine. Why are you dizzy again?" He was afraid that he would neglect Yan Ziyuan, so he hurriedly asked her, "Ziyuan, is there something wrong? You sit down first." Yan Ziyuan looked at them hugging each other, slightly drooping her eyes. "Nothing, I just came to see. If there's nothing else, I'll go first." She strode out. Gu Zian was afraid that she would be sad. hurriedly said, "Yin, you wait. I have something to say to you." Yin Ziyuan stopped but did not look back. "What do you want to say? Are you angry?" "No," Yin Ziyuan replied with 2 words. She thought she would be angry and jealous. But no, she didn't feel jealous. She just felt a little tired. Perhaps she already knew that Rong Yin and herself would serve the same husband. So she subconsciously accepted it. She said to herself, she suddenly came here because she felt a little uncertain about her own feelings. She wanted to see him to make her mind firmer, but she didn't expect to see this scene. Was this the kind of life she wanted to live? She was jealous of this woman in the back residence. Just thinking about this kind of life made her feel vexed. Gu Ziyan wanted to stop her, but Rong Yin was wrapped around his body. He couldn't get away, so he could only watch her leave. Forget it. After the wedding ceremony with her tomorrow, he would coax her properly during the wedding night. After all, women were all made of water and were very easy to coax. He looked at the face beside him, and his head started to hurt. 2 women were enough to make him feel like he was in a terrible fix. How did those men with multiple wives deal with all this? With great difficulty, he managed to send Rong Yin away. He breathed a sigh of relief. Just as he was about to go to the housekeeper to see if he had missed anything, a shadow flashed in front of him, and a person appeared out of nowhere. That person was wearing a black robe and a ferocious mask on his face, making it impossible for others to see his face. This person appeared out of thin air on a chair in the hall, lazily looking at him. His deep eyes fell on him, and with a smile that wasn't a smile. "How does it feel to see 2 women fighting over you?" This person's voice has obviously been specially processed. It was slightly hoarse, but it was extremely pleasant to listen to, with a taste of ecstasy. Gu Ziyan was a little surprised, and hurriedly saluted him. "Benefactor, what brings you here?" "I came to see you," the person lazily said, "and also to retrieve the thing that this lord and you agreed on." Gu Ziyan's face slightly changed, and he paused. "Benefactor, forgive Ziyan for asking, but after Benefactor took away Ziyan's Guqin soul, will Ziyan not be able to play the Guqin anymore?" The person's eyes flickered slightly. "Why? Do you regret it?" Chapter 982. He smiled coldly. "I never force people. It's not too late for you to regret now. I don't need your Guqin soul, but I will immediately remove the curse on Yin Ziyuan. Let her really remember everything." Gu Ziyan's expression changed greatly. He quickly shook his head. "No, I can't." "Since you can't, then you have to fulfill your promise to me?" The man in black pressed. "Okay." Gu Ziyan's face was slightly pale. He didn't know what would happen if he lost his Guqin soul, but he had no way out now. He couldn't afford to lose Yin Ziyuan again and ruin this carefully planned wedding. "Don't worry. After you lose your Guqin soul, you will still be a normal man. You won't feel any pain. You can even play the Guqin for fun." The man guided patiently. It turned out that he could still play the Guqin normally. Gu Ziyan was finally relieved. "How do I get this Guqin soul?" Gu Ziyan looked at the man who was like the Dark Knight. "Ziyan doesn't know how to do it. Or should I get it myself, Benefactor?" The man said indifferently, "It's not difficult. Just listen to my instructions." If he could get it himself without asking for the other party's permission, why would he waste so much effort? He instructed Gu Ziyan to sit in a position he specified. He stretched out his hands in the air, and a Guqin appeared in his hands. Gu Ziyan only felt dizzy. The Guqin was also ink black and looked a little strange. The man placed the Guqin on Gu Ziyan's lap. He gently cut Gu Ziyan's finger with his finger. Drops of blood emerged from Gu Ziyan's fingertip and dripped onto the Guqin. It was strange. Gu Ziyan's finger was cut, but he didn't feel any pain. After his blood dripped onto the Guqin, it didn't flow. Instead, it quickly sank into the strings and disappeared in the blink of an eye. The wound on Gu Ziyan's finger also disappeared. "Follow my instructions and play a tune." That person began to teach him the specific steps. Gu Ziyan was a man of his word. One command, one action. Less than an hour later, Gu Ziyan slowly opened his eyes. The zither on his lap was gone, and the black-robed man was nowhere to be seen. He slowly got up and moved his arms and legs. There was nothing wrong with them. It seemed that the black-clothed man did not lie to him. Although he had lost his zither soul, there was nothing strange about it. He recalled the strange zither again. He didn't know why, but he had a feeling that the zither should be dark blue. That black-robed man also gave him a sense of déjà vu, as if he had seen him somewhere before, but he couldn't remember where. As he pondered, he quickly returned to his zither room. He picked up a guqin and began to play it. It was a familiar fingering technique and a familiar melody. He heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that he still knew how to play the guqin, and he was quite good at it. Outside the door, an old servant who was always by his side listened for a while. Suddenly, he felt that something was wrong. The notes that the young master played were all correct, but it seemed to have lost its soul. It seemed to be a little rigid and no longer intoxicating. In a private room of a restaurant, Ning Xiuma, Shun Jiuli, and Yi Feng sat opposite each other. There were all kinds of dishes on the table. It was sumptuous. The dishes were cooked by the best chefs in a restaurant. They looked, smelled, and tasted good. Naturally, the wine was also the best. It was transparent amber in the wine cup. The wine was fragrant and intoxicating. Chapter 983. Yi Feng knew that Master Han liked tea, so he wanted to invite them to a tea house. However, the master simply said, "I'm hungry." Yi Feng immediately took the hint and led them to the best restaurant in Daliang City and ordered the best dishes. Ning Xiuma felt that the Almighty was not kind. Yi Feng was already so depressed, yet he still wanted to rip him off without batting an eyelid. Hungry? How could he still feel hungry when he was at the level of a master? How strange. Ning Xiuma had always thought that the Almighty was incomparably high and mighty in front of the world. He was above the common populace, and sometimes he would even save the world like a bodhisattva. However, she did not expect him to have such a wicked side. She felt that her definition of the Almighty had been refreshed again. "Almighty, I thought you didn't eat the 5 grains of the mortal world anymore. Why did you order so much this time?" Ning Xiuma asked him through telepathy. Shun Jili glanced at her. "If I'm not hungry, aren't you hungry too?" So, the Almighty ordered for her? Ning Xiuma was touched. She was indeed hungry, but there were too many things to do after coming here, so she did not have time to think about it. She glanced at the dishes on the table again. Indeed, 9 out of 10 dishes were her favorite. However, why was there a table full of more than 20 dishes? She would be full even if she tasted all of them. "Master, where are you?" "Wah, I'm so tired from rushing here." Kiran's panting howl sounded in Ning Xiuma's mind. Apparently, it had just arrived. It was 4 hours later than Ning Xiuma and the rest. Ning Xiuma told it the address. After a while, Kiran barged in amidst the exclamations of the diners downstairs. It was in such a hurry that it was covered in sweat. As soon as it entered, it pounced in front of Ning Xiuma. It almost stuck out its tongue and gasped for breath. "Master, I'm starving. He's too fast. I can't catch up with him. I'm starving to death." She stared at the table full of dishes and was moved to tears. "Master, you're so nice. You knew that Little Apple would be hungry, so you specially ordered such a big table of dishes for Little Apple." Ning Xiuma, she couldn't help but admire the Almighty's ability to calculate. He was able to accurately calculate the time Kiran would arrive so that she, the owner, could prepare food for him in time. Kiran had expended a lot of energy this time. Naturally, it was tired and hungry. Therefore, it ate 70 to 80% of the food on the table. Naturally, Ning Xiuma was also very satisfied. Of course, she didn't forget her business. "Almighty, what do you mean by strange?" Shun Juli gently swirled the wine glass in his hand. "Sleep without speaking, eat without speaking. Why are you in such a hurry? Let's eat first." Ning Xiuma, "Almighty, you're not purposely trying to trick Yi Feng into eating a meal, are you?" She looked at Yi Feng. Yi Feng was also very anxious. Perhaps it was because he had endured for so many years that he had cultivated an unusual calmness. Therefore, he didn't rush them. He only poured wine and served food for the two of them. Although he wasn't good with words, he still had the necessary etiquette. Ning Xiuma had attended many banquets in her life. She had seen all kinds of atmosphere, but she had never seen this kind of banquet. The 3 of them didn't talk much and just ate their own food. Shun Jili took good care of her from beginning to end. From time to time, he would serve her food. When he saw what she liked to eat, he would teleport the plate in front of her. He would only serve Kieran after she tasted it. Yifeng had a lot on his mind. He didn't eat much and just accompanied the two of them. Halfway through the meal, a person downstairs said loudly, "Student Gu Zian is here to visit Celestial Master Han." Chapter 984. Ning Xuema's eyes flickered. Gu Zian was quite well informed. He had gotten news that Han Shangyue was in Daliang City so quickly. Yifeng's expression changed slightly. He gripped his wine cup tightly and said, "Master, do you want me to leave for a while?" Shen Juli glanced at him and said, "You don't owe him anything. Why are you hiding from him?" Yifeng did not say anything. Ning Xuema did not interrupt either. She crossed her arms and sat at the side. Although she had not guessed Shen Juli's motive, she could tell that he wanted to interfere in this matter. "Come in," Shen Juli said casually. Gu Zian walked in with large strides. When he saw Yifeng sitting there, he was a little stunned and his expression changed slightly. A hint of guilt flashed across his eyes, but it quickly returned to normal. He bowed respectfully to Shen Juli. He had personally come to deliver the invitation to Master Han and Madame Ru to attend his wedding tomorrow. Shen Juli sat there and looked at him. He raised his wine cup and took a sip. He said casually, "I am not interested in attending other people's weddings." Gu Zian naturally opened his mouth and begged. Master Han was of noble status. Since he had come to Daliang City as the son-in-law of the city lord, he had to come and deliver the invitation. Gu Zian did not have much confidence when he came. After all, everyone knew that Master Han was famous for being difficult to invite. Master Han could refuse, but as the host, Gu Zian could not refuse. Of course, it was fine if he could not invite him. If he could invite him, it would add a lot of color to his wedding. Therefore, he was very sincere when he invited the other party to join him. Just as he was about to break his lips, Han Shangyue glanced at Ning Xuema. Ning Xuema was also a quick-witted person. She immediately said, "Guru, Yin Ziyuan and I have some friendship. For my sake, you should go." Shen Juli seemed to be moved. He said lightly, "It's not impossible to make a trip there." Gu Zian glanced at the wine jug. The wine jug flew up on its own and filled up a cup in front of Gu Zian. "That depends on your sincerity." Gu Zian was overjoyed when he heard that Zian was relieved. He immediately raised the wine cup in front of him and said, "Master, Zian is sincerely inviting the two of you. Zian will drink this cup as a sign of respect." "I was just about to drink it." "The two of you?" Shen Juli repeated with a faint smile. Gu Zian was also a smart person. He immediately understood what Han Shangyue was trying to say. After a slight pause, he could only say, "It's a slip of the tongue. The three of you, it's the three of you." Yifeng's expression changed slightly. Personally attend the wedding of his sweetheart? He was not prepared for this yet. He was about to subconsciously refuse when Ning Xuema glanced at him. Yifeng's heart skipped a beat. He endured it and did not speak. Shen Juli said lightly, "This is the prince of the Sharkmen. Are you only going to say a few words of greeting?" Now that things had developed to this point, Gu Zian had no way out. He could only say, "So young Master Yi is the prince of the Sharkmen. Previously, young Master Yi lowered himself to be a secret guard in front of my wife. This Gu is also negligent. I apologize to you here." His words were like a needle hidden in silk floss. On the surface, he was apologizing, but on the inside, he was mocking Yifeng's behavior of being a secret guard in front of Yin Ziyuan. Ning Xuema could not help but glance at Gu Zian. She originally thought that this person had a bit of a scholar's pride and loftiness. She did not expect him to be so experienced in the ways of the world. He did not lose out to a wily old fox in the Jianghu and had a bit of a Philistine aura. Chapter 985. Him calling Yin Ziyuan wifey in front of Yifeng was clearly a kind of warning and also a declaration of possession. The provocation was still very strong. Ning Xuema could not stand it and was just about to speak when Shen Juli put a hand on her shoulder and said coolly, This seat wants to eat that stir-fried heaven crystal fish. Ning Xiaoma brought that plate of fish over and placed it in front of him. Only after serving did she come back to her senses. Great God had always been putting food in her bowl. Why did he suddenly let her serve food for him? With this distraction, she forgot about standing up for Yifeng. Yifeng over there said coolly, "For her, I won't feel aggrieved no matter what I do." Gu Zian choked and then said with a smile, "Young Master Ye's love and care for wifey is touching. But wifey having me, this husband, to dote on her in the future is enough. Young Master, you should also go and find his own happiness." Yifeng lowered his eyes slightly and said coolly, "This he only hopes that she can obtain happiness. As for other things, there's no need to trouble child Gu to worry." A brief conversation. The two people's styles were immediately superior. Two people both loved the same woman. One was possessing her by hook or by crook, while the other was fulfilling the other party's happiness. Ning Xiaoma could not resist shooting a glance at Yifeng. She did not misjudge Yifeng. This person was a true gentleman who was open and above board. Gu Zian sucked in a breath. This Gu will give her happiness. Yifeng raised his wine cup and said coolly, "You better remember this sentence of yours. Otherwise, this you will be the first to not let you off." His words were full of vigor. But Gu Zian let out a sigh in relief after hearing it. Yifeng saying this meant that he was withdrawing. He made this request in the capacity of Yan Ziyuan's maiden family. Gu Zian also finally set his mind at ease and said with a smile, "I definitely won't disappoint Brother Yi. In the future, when we, husband and wife, are in harmony, we will have to invite Brother Yi again." Gu Zian left the two invitations behind and left. He walked away triumphantly. Being able to invite Gu Zian as a guest at his wedding would definitely spread throughout the entire continent in the future. Then, Gu Zian's fame would also rise, and his title as the Zither Saint would become even more resounding and bright. Naturally, he would not be able to escape the glory, splendor, and wealth that he deserved. A vile character intoxicated by success. The little Qilin commented after Gu Zian left. Ning Xiaoma frowned slightly. She felt that Gu Zian seemed to have changed. Originally, he had a pure and noble aura about him, but now that they met again, that aura had disappeared without a trace. Instead, it was filled with the aura of a merchant. If Yan Ziyuan really married him, would she really be happy? Ning Xiaoma deeply doubted this point. She looked at Yifeng and then thought about Gu Zian. She could not help but sigh. Was Yan Ziyuan that girl blind? She held a fisheye in her arms like a treasure, but gave up a real pearl. Yifeng, are you really going to give up? Ning Xiaoma felt unreconciled for Yifeng. If Yifeng had lost to a super outstanding person, then it would have been fine. But to lose to such a person, even she felt aggrieved for him. Yifeng slightly clenched his fists. He also did not want to give up. He also felt that it was not worth it for Yan Ziyuan. But Yan Ziyuan liked that man. What could he do? He did not want to force her to do anything. He lowered his eyes and did not say anything. Who you like is not a problem of compatibility, Shun Juli suddenly said. His words were the truth. After saying this, he faintly glanced at Ning Xiaoma. Ning Xiaoma originally felt that his words were very reasonable, but when she saw him looking at her, she immediately became suspicious. Chapter 986. Did he think that the two of them were not compatible? TSK. Even if their identities were a little unsuitable, but wasn't she improving at a rapid pace? Was there anyone else in the world who improved as fast as her? She had potential. She was a dark horse. If she cultivated for a few thousand years, she might even be more powerful than him. She turned her head and looked at him with a faint smile. Even if you like him, you can give up if you don't think we're compatible. Did he think she cared? Her luck with men was extraordinarily good. You can't give up. It's best if you like him. Shun Juli poured wine for her. Be good. Try this. It suits your taste. He then peeled a crab and placed it on her plate. Yifeng, the cold and aloof Master Han Shanhua, was actually serving a girl like this, and it was so smooth that it didn't seem out of place at all. Master Han Shanhua's possessive attitude, towards Ning Xuema could be seen even by a blind person. Looking at Ning Xuema's attitude, it was obvious that she also liked this master. This feeling of mutual affection was so good. He actually wanted to serve someone like this. And he also wanted to put that person in his hands and dote on her. But it was a pity that that person was still ruthless towards him. He could only let go and fulfill her wish. Guru, you said that there was something strange about this matter. What was strange about it? Can you tell me now? Ning Xuema asked after eating and drinking to her heart's content. Yin Zuan was cursed by someone. Shun Julie said slowly, but it had an earth-shattering effect. Yi Feng's hand trembled, and he suddenly looked up. She was cursed? What kind of curse? Ning Xuema also raised her eyebrows in surprise. She was a doctor and was good at treating difficult and complicated diseases, but she was a layman when it came to curses. What kind of curse? The twin life curse. Shun Julie said lightly. The person under this curse will be dead set on liking the person under the curse, regardless of any gains or losses. Even if the person deeply hated that person, once under the curse, they will still like that person. If the curse is not broken, their liking will not change. You're saying that Yin Ziyuan was under Gu Ziyan's curse? He actually knows this kind of mysterious martial arts? Ning Xuema's eyebrows raised even higher. Yi Feng shook his head. I've observed Gu Ziyan for 3 years, so I'm very clear about his background. His psychokinesis is not bad, and his talent in the art of music is extremely high, but the rest is sloppy and ordinary. He shouldn't have such mysterious and profound martial arts. Who said that Gu Ziyan was the one who cast the curse? He doesn't have that ability. To practice this technique, one needs to be at least at the 9th level of the Earth rank. Gu Ziyan is only at the 6th level of the human rank. Naturally, it wasn't him who did it. Then someone is helping him. Ning Xuema immediately thought of the key question. That's right. The method of using this curse is quite complicated. The real caster will pass this curse to Gu Ziyan and then transfer the power to him behind his back, allowing him to quickly cast the curse on Yin Ziyuan. Once the curse succeeds, the real caster will withdraw the power. So, the reason why Ziyuan is so dead set on Gu Ziyan is because of this curse? Yin Ziyuan hasn't been under this curse for a long time. It should be less than 20 days. Shen Jiuli's eyes were like torches as he mentioned the date. His gaze fell on Yi Feng. As for before, it's because of her true feelings, her true liking. She also liked Gu Ziyan before. Ning Xuema and Yi Feng both knew this. Yi Feng smiled bitterly. I don't quite understand. Ziyuan originally liked him. Isn't it unnecessary for him to use this curse? Chapter 987. Shen Jili raised his hand and took a sip of tea. We can only find out after the curse is broken. Ning Xuema clapped her hands and said, maybe she used to like Gu Ziyan, but later realized that he was actually a scumbag and didn't like him anymore? Sigh. That doesn't seem to be entirely right. I heard that Yin Ziyuan tried her best to save Yi Feng. How could she immediately put Yi Feng's matter aside after being hit by this curse and happily get married? Wouldn't she be puzzled by her previous actions of trying so hard to save him? Part of her memory seems to have been erased, Shun Julie said again. I'm afraid she doesn't remember that she was in a hurry to save Yi Feng. Ning Xuema was surprised. Memories can be erased? Who has such a perverted ability? Shun Julie was speechless. He didn't say anything, but he suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. It seemed that he did have such a perverted ability, and he had used it on her several times. Fortunately, Ning Xuema's attention quickly shifted. It seems that Ziyuan might have fallen in love with someone else. So Gu Ziyan had no choice but to use such a wicked method. Is there a way to break this curse? Shun Julie said, this curse won't last for too long, at most half a year. After half a year, the curse will be broken. Ning Xuema was speechless. After half a year, it will be too late. By then, Ziyuan might even have a baby. What's done can't be undone. No matter how much she hates Gu Ziyan, there's nothing she can do. She can only be depressed for the rest of her life. Yi Feng's eyes were burning. She died of depression in her previous life, so she can't do the same in this life. Shun Jili looked at him. What are you going to do? I'm going to ruin their wedding. Yi Feng said firmly. If you ruin this wedding, she might hate you even more. Moreover, she might still like Gu Zian after the curse was lifted half a year later. What will you do then? I don't want her to regret it for the rest of her life. If she wants to hate me, let her hate me. If she still likes that man after the curse is broken, I will think of a way to help her. In this life, I only hope that she won't have any more regrets. Yifeng really loved Yin Ziyuan. He had already given up everything for her. Ning Xiuma was also moved by his feelings. She looked at Shan Juli and asked, Great God, is there no way to break the curse for Yin Ziyuan in advance? Shan Juli said indifferently, Yes, but it's a little complicated and not easy to do. Tell me about it. You need 3 flowers of ice flame, and these flowers must be immediately picked and mixed with the blood of the caster. Only then will it be effective. Shen Juli explained. Ning Xuema frowned slightly. She already understood the structure of this world. She knew that the flowers of ice flame grew on the ice field thousands of miles away from here, and it was extremely rare. It was not easy to find. Although the ice field was called an ice field, it was actually composed of floating ice like the North Pole. It was not a real land and was surrounded by the sea. Usually, no one would venture there. No ships passed by there. It was a real no-man's land. Yifeng was a sharkman after all. If he went there alone, the sea would not be a problem for him. However, the condition of taking the flower while it was fresh and mixed with the blood of the caster required him to bring Yin Zuan and Gu Zian with him. Would they be willing to go there obediently? It was impossible to think about it. Even if Yin Ziyuan trusted Ning Xiuma more, if Ning Xiuma told her the truth, she might follow to the ice field to ask for the truth. But what about Gu Zian? He would definitely not agree to it. He might even try to stop Yin Ziyuan from going there. Chapter 988. Yifeng obviously also considered this point and frowned. Gu Zian's blood also needs to be fresh? Shun Jili nodded. Yes, we must immediately collect blood from a living person after finding the flower of ice flame and feed it to Yin Ziyuan. Only then can the curse be immediately lifted. Yifeng clenched his fist and said, Then I'll just kidnap Gu Zian. His kung fu was much better than Gu Zian's. It would be easy for him to kidnap that person. Why be so rough? Ning Xuema suddenly smiled. If you kidnap the groom at the wedding, Ziyuan will hate you even more. It's better to let them go voluntarily. Voluntarily? How is that possible? Yifeng raised his eyebrows. Shen Juli looked at her with his chin in his hand. Did you think of a way? Ning Xiuma smiled slightly. I think we can poison Gu Zian and say that only the flower of ice flame can cure it. Also, it must be eaten while it is fresh. I guarantee that Gu Zian will go. Since Gu Zian will go, Ziyuan will be worried about him and will naturally follow him. Won't this solve the problem? This was indeed a good idea, without shedding a drop of blood. Shan Jili raised his hand and poured a cup of tea for her. I don't know what kind of poison you want to give him. How? This. I have to find a slow-acting one that doesn't cause too much harm to the human body and looks scary. As for how to do it, we can only act according to the circumstances tomorrow. Shun Jili shook his head. No. If you suddenly poison him tomorrow, what if he can't act up at that time and completes the wedding ceremony? At that time, what's done can't be undone. Besides, if you are present and he is poisoned, he may not believe you. Or if he believes you, he is afraid of long delays and insists on finding the medicine after the wedding ceremony. What should he do? Ning Xiuma paused for a moment. She felt that Shun Jili was right. She pondered for a moment and stood up. That's easy. I'll go and poison him now. He definitely won't be able to perform the wedding ceremony. Shun Jili grabbed her. What's the hurry? You don't have to do it. Ning Xiuma was enlightened. Could it be that you have already thought of this step and poisoned him just now? Shun Jili didn't answer, but stood up lightly. It's late. It's time to rest. He took Ning Xiuma's hand and walked downstairs. Yifeng and Yin Ziyuan were not fated. Yin Ziyuan's fate was to marry Gu Zian, and Gu Zian would become rich. After the age of 30, he would violate his oath and take in countless concubines, while Yin Zuin would die of depression. This was the original fate of Yi Feng and Yin Ziyuan. What they were doing now was going against the heavens and changing their fate. The heavens were unpredictable, and changing fate would bring misfortune to those who participated, especially those who participated. Therefore, Shan Jili didn't want Ning Xiuma to really intervene in this matter, lest she be more unlucky. If the heavens wanted to take revenge, they could take revenge on him. Thank you very much, Master. Yi Feng felt his knees behind him. You don't have to thank me. If you want to thank someone, thank your friend Xiuma. Shan Jili left with Ning Xiuma without looking back. The next night, the streets of Daliang City were in an uproar again. The wedding that everyone in Daliang had been looking forward to was all talk and no action. In the morning, the wedding was still bustling with noise and excitement. Whether it was the wedding guards or the bride's dowry that stretched for miles, it was an eye-opener for everyone in the city. However, no one expected the groom, Gu Ziyan, to suddenly fall ill and faint in the wedding hall before the bride even arrived at the Gu mansion. Chapter 989. At that time, after the chaos, all the doctors in the city were invited to the Gu mansion, but no one could diagnose Gu Ziyan's illness. Just when everyone was anxious and didn't know what to do, Master Han Shangyue arrived with the recently famous miracle Dr. Ning Xiuma. This Miss Ning was indeed worthy of her title as a divine doctor. She managed to wake Gu Ziyan up in just a few moments, but Gu Ziyan was still so weak that he could barely stand. Ning Xiuma told him that if he wanted to fully recover, he had to personally go to the ice field to pick the ice flame flower and mix it with fresh Sharkman's tears. Otherwise, he would be completely paralyzed in half a month and could only struggle on the sickbed for the rest of his life. As for Master Han, his words were firm. If the wedding continued, it would be detrimental to the groom and his life would be in danger. Unless the date was changed. No one doubted Master Han's words. City Lord Yin also didn't want his daughter to become a widow right after getting married, so he begged Master Han to find another auspicious date. Master Han wasn't easy to beg. If it wasn't for Ning Xiuma's face, he wouldn't have said what he said just now. The more he said, the more City Lord Yin believed him. In the end, he almost knelt down and begged on behalf of his daughter. Only then did Master Han give him face and tell him a date. And that date was 3 months later. Gu Ziyan and City Lord Yin both knew that Yin Ziwen would only return to normal after half a year, so 3 months wasn't too late. Nothing would change. So City Lord Yin decided on the spot to postpone the wedding to the date 3 months later. Just like that, the bustling wedding came to an end, and it became the talk of the town. And Ning Xiuma's reputation as a miracle doctor became even more famous. Because Gu Ziyan's illness couldn't be delayed, City Lord Yin immediately arranged for a group of people to go to the ice fields. Although Gu Ziyan could walk normally, he had lost all of his psychokinesis, so he only had the ability of an ordinary person. He needed someone to take care of him, so Yin Ziwen naturally volunteered to stay by his side. When Rong Yin heard about this, in order to show her virtuousness and love for Gu Ziyan, she naturally wanted to follow. But she was rejected by Gu Ziyan without any hesitation. Rong Yan's martial arts skills were just for show. If she went, not only would she be of no help, she would also be a hindrance. So he had to ask someone to take care of her. Rong Yan's heart was naturally unwilling. She cried in front of Gu Ziyan, as if they were parting forever. This made Gu Ziyan extremely annoyed, and from then on, he didn't like her. It was already late in the winter. Especially flying towards the coldest northwest direction, the temperature was getting colder and colder. Naturally, the wind was also extremely cold. Ning Xiuma once again sat on Kiran's back, and Shun Juli sat behind her. This time, he didn't set up a barrier to resist the wind, so Ning Xiuma once again deeply felt the coldness of the winter. She closed her eyes slightly and circulated the psychokinesis of fire around her body to expel the biting cold. Shun Juli thought that once she felt the cold, she would automatically shrink into his arms, but he didn't expect that she would take the opportunity to practice. It had to be said that this was a good time to practice the psychokinesis of fire. Under the stimulation of the cold wind, Ning Shuima's practice speed was twice as fast as normal practice. Shun Juli looked at her straight back, and his eyes flashed with a touch of relief. She was really a hard-working child. Even without his urging, she didn't forget to practice at all times. Kirin also flew leisurely. This time, it didn't have to rush, so it flew leisurely much faster than the big bird behind it. Chapter 990. In order to save his future son-in-law, as well as to make his daughter more comfortable, City Lord Yin had given up the carriage that the emperor had given him. Although City Lord Yin was only a city lord, because Daliang City was a frontier fortress, the emperor valued it greatly. In order to win him over, Lu Hinti had once given him a carriage that was even bigger than the one that Ji Yun Huang had taken when he left the Sun Moon sect. 3 people could easily sit in it. The carriage was carried by a huge red-crowned crane, which flew quickly and steadily. Of course, this red-crowned crane speed was still far from Kirin's. It could fly about 3,000 miles a day. With its speed, it would take at least 4 days to reach the ice plains. Gu Ziyan, Yin Ziwen, and Yi Feng were now sitting together in the carriage. The atmosphere in the carriage was slightly strange. Gu Ziyan and Yin Ziyan sat side by side, and the two of them whispered a few words from time to time. They looked quite harmonious. Yi Feng, on the other hand, sat opposite them. His eyes were slightly closed the entire time, and he didn't say a word. For some reason, Yin Ziyuan felt an inexplicable anger in her heart whenever she saw Yi Feng. She was very unwilling to be in the same carriage as him. She liked Gu Ziyan very much now, so she naturally cherished the opportunity to be in the same carriage as him. However, Yi Feng was like a big third wheel, which made her feel uncomfortable being close to Gu Ziyan. She wanted nothing more than to find an excuse to kick Yi Feng out. However, her fiancé, Gu Ziyan, required a drop of Yi Feng's Sharkman's blood every 2 hours to maintain his normal activities. Therefore, although she was very disgusted with Yi Feng sitting in the carriage, she couldn't kick him out. However, she felt that the heavens were treating her well for being able to sit next to her sweetheart like this without Rong Yin coming out to disturb them. She was, after all, an innocent and unaffected young girl. As long as she stayed by her sweetheart's side and whispered to him, she would feel satisfied. She didn't care whether they were intimate or not. Yin Ziyuan felt that her emotions were a little strange. She inexplicably hated Yi Feng and didn't want to see him. However, when she was talking intimately with Gu Ziyan, she saw Yi Feng sitting quietly with his eyes lowered. She felt even more angry and even a little sad. These emotions were intertwined, and even she couldn't tell what it was like. She would glance at him once in a while, and then look away with hatred. Compared to her, Gu Ziyan was more miserable. His love rival was sitting right in front of him. So naturally, he wanted to show the other party that he owned Yin Ziyuan. So, intentionally or unintentionally, he would make some physical contact with Yin Ziyuan. Sometimes he would hug her waist, put his arm around her shoulders, or even hold her hand. His actions should have a certain visual impact on Yi Feng and make him feel sad. However, Yi Feng's forbearance was too good. No matter what Gu Ziyan did, Yi Feng always sat there expressionlessly. His handsome face didn't show any emotion. This made Gu Ziyan feel very unaccomplished. Gu Ziyan's forbearance was usually very good, but this time, he didn't know if it was because he had lost his psychokinesis and because his sweetheart was sitting next to him, but he couldn't help but feel aroused when he made these physical contact with Yin Ziyuan. Since arousal would cause changes to the body, Yin Ziyuan was an unromantic young girl. She accidentally saw his robe gradually rising and thought that his illness was acting up again. So she asked him about it with concern. Gu Ziyan wasn't a thin-skinned person, but when his love rival was sitting right in front of him, this kind of situation made him feel very embarrassed. In shock, the part of his robe that was raised went back down. Chapter 991. Men were like that. The more secretive and untouchable a place was, the easier it was for them to get aroused. Even though he knew that he shouldn't do this, his second brother still couldn't help but raise his head again and again. Then he held it back again and again. After a few times, he couldn't take it anymore. He was afraid that he would be stimulated to the point that he couldn't be a real man in the future. Therefore, he didn't dare to be too intimate with Yanziyuan anymore and became a gentleman. He talked to Yanziyuan politely and didn't even dare to hold her hand anymore. As for Yifeng, although his eyes were closed, he could still hear every movement of the two people in front of him clearly. When he was sitting in the carriage, he was prepared to face their intimacy. Although he was calm on the surface, what about his heart? He smiled bitterly in his heart. It turned out that no matter how prepared he was, his heart would still hurt when he saw his sweetheart being intimate with another man. On Kiran's back, as the weather became colder, Shunjili set up a wizardry barrier to cover himself and Ning Xiuma. As soon as he finished setting up the wizardry barrier, Ning Xiuma, who had been sitting there, fell into his arms unceremoniously. "I'm so tired." Shunjili hugged the beauty in his arms and was in a good mood. He felt her pulse and felt that her fire psychokinesis had increased a little. She was indeed a genius. She was more talented than any of his disciples. He wasn't wrong about this disciple. Of course, his taste in choosing a wife was even better. Only she was worthy to stay by his side and laugh with him. With her by his side, he never felt bored again. He lowered his head and planted a kiss on her forehead, right on top of her cinnabar mole. Ning Xiuma felt an itch between her eyebrows from his kiss. She smiled and wanted to dodge, but her waist was held tightly by him. "If you're tired, take a nap. I'll wake you up when we arrive." Shunjili patted her pretty face. Ning Xiuma yawned. She was really sleepy, but she still had a question. "Guru, why did you ask Yifeng to feed Guzian a drop of blood every 2 hours? Did Guzian really need his blood to function normally?" Shunjili said indifferently. "Otherwise, how could Yifeng be in the same carriage as them?" "So, you want to kick Yifeng into their carriage? But isn't it a little pitiful for Yifeng? He has to watch those two get intimate." Ning Xiuma could imagine the scene inside, even if she used her toes to think. She felt a little sad for Yifeng. "With Yifeng there, they won't go too far. I'm doing this to protect your friend's innocence." Ning Xiuma was speechless. That's true. If those two were allowed to stay in the same carriage, with Gu Zian's temperament, he might take the opportunity to get Yanziyuan. What's done can't be undone. So before everything was clear, it was better for Yifeng to stay there. As for his feelings, he would suffer for the time being. At least he still had a glimmer of hope, right? "Guru, what you're doing is changing their fate, right? Look, after Yifeng and Yanziyuan's fate is changed, will they be fated?" This was what Ning Xiuma was most worried about. Shunjili shook his head slightly. After changing fate, their fate will become chaotic and develop in an unpredictable direction. Whether they are fated or not will depend on themselves. I can't predict it. So this was the effect of changing fate. Ning Xiuma stopped talking. After a long silence, she suddenly asked, "If you help them change their fate, will it affect you?" Chapter 992. When she was in the modern era, she had heard the fortune-tellers say that if a peerless master in this field changed someone's fate, he or she would be in trouble. Therefore, in the spiritual realm, changing someone's fate was a big taboo. No one was willing to take this risk. Shunjili ruffled her hair and replied, "You're overthinking it. Let's sleep." The little girl knew how to think for him. Not bad. The corners of his lips curled up slightly. He had lived for so long, but he had never really cared about anyone or anything. It was rare for him to care about someone so much. Naturally, he was willing to do something for her. Besides, it was not like he had never done this kind of thing before. When he was bored and in a good mood, he had done a few things to change someone's fate. Indeed, he would be punished by the heavenly Tao. However, those punishments were nothing to him. He could deal with them easily, because this matter was not very urgent, and Guzian and Yanziyuan's physiques were not very good now. They would usually find an inn to rest after flying for a day. Guzian originally wanted to share a room with Yanziyuan, But Ning Xuema easily broke his fantasy with one sentence. Ziyuan, you and Child Gu are not married yet. I will share a room with you. Yin Ziyuan still did not understand the matters between men and women. She was still worried about Gu Ziyan. Ziyan's body is weak. He needs someone to take care of him. It's just a nap. He's just a little weak. It's not like he can't take care of himself. Why would he need someone to take care of him? Besides, Child Gu is a famous gentleman. If you two live together without marriage, people will criticize you. Don't you think so, Child Gu? Ning Xuema's words completely cut off Gu Ziyan's thoughts. He could only cough and agree with Ning Xuema. Very well. Ziyuan, you're tired too. You and Madame Ning should rest early. Thus, the two women shared a room, while the other three men each had a guest room, sleeping separately. Ning Xuema was indeed tired. Not long after she lay on the bed, she fell asleep. She had another night of messy dreams. When she woke up the next day, she was pleasantly surprised to find that she actually remembered some of her dreams. Of course, she only remembered a few vague bits and pieces. For example, she vaguely remembered that in her dream, a fox demon had willingly agreed to be the maid of a man in white who had a very high status. However, because she had never done this kind of rough work before, she appeared clumsy and clumsy. Not only did the white-clothed man not enjoy her service, he also had to frequently serve her. Because the man in white was a perfectionist, he couldn't bear to see the people around him with disheveled clothes or messy hair. So he often helped her tie up her hair and dressed her up beautifully. He also couldn't bear to see her spoil his fish. She clearly loved to eat fish. Every time he cooked, she would watch from the side. Originally, the white-clothed man cooked the fish for himself. Later on, he couldn't bear to see her greedy look, so he simply cooked for her and won a few praises from her, of course. The white-clothed man didn't buy her praises. He would use his poisonous tongue to mock her, making the little fox demon choke on her words. The white-clothed man's cooking seemed to be a hobby that came occasionally. He didn't cook often. However, the little fox demon was a picky eater. She liked the fish he cooked and often pestered him to cook for her. Perhaps it was because the fish he cooked had people who liked it, which made the white-clothed man feel a sense of accomplishment. So, when the little fox pestered him, he would cook for her a few times. The result was that she only ate the food he cooked. She couldn't eat other people's food. Chapter 993. When Ning Xuema woke up, she hugged her knees and thought about it for a while. Then she let out a long sigh of relief. She could finally remember a little bit of the dream. Although it was only a few fragments, and she still couldn't remember the faces and identities of the people in the dream, it was still an improvement compared to before. She turned her head and found that the moonlight flute had come out of the storage bag on its own. It was releasing a soft glow next to her pillow. Her heart skipped a beat. Was it because of this flute that she could remember a little bit of the dream? It also had the ability to cure her only strange illness? Also, how did it manage to sneak out? Could it be that this treasure had a spirit? It came out of its own accord to help her cure her strange illness? She sat on the bed and looked at the flute over and over again for a while, but she couldn't find anything special about it. Because they had to leave early the next morning, Ning Xuema didn't study the flute for long before putting it away and putting it aside. The further they flew in that direction, the colder the weather became. Especially above the clouds, the temperature was almost -20 degrees. It was true that a drop of water would turn into ice. Although cultivating in this kind of weather was hard, this kind of strong stimulation allowed Ning Xuema's cultivation to grow even faster. According to Shun Juli's plan, he would let her cultivate freely for 2 hours and then set up an enchantment for her to rest. But Ning Xuema wasn't willing. She would cultivate for 4 hours and then rest for an hour in the enchantment. After every cultivation session, her little face would be flushed red from the wind and her hands and feet would be cold like popsicles. But her entire body was excited and her eyes were bright like stars. Shun Juli was also worried that she would go astray if she was too eager to succeed in her cultivation. Hence, he would massage her for an hour after she finished her cultivation. Firstly, It was to check on her chi engine. Secondly, it was to adjust her chi that had gone astray in her body. In the end, Ning Xiaomo got used to his massage. Every time she finished practicing, she would simply fall into his arms and enjoy his massage for a few minutes like a lazy cat, chatting with him. Her fire psychokinesis grew very quickly and was already close to Earth rank level 3. According to Shun Julie's calculations, by the time they reached the ice field, her fire psychokinesis would have a breakthrough and enter Earth rank level 3. He could now practice some rather advanced fire element martial arts. Flying long distances in the air was originally a very boring thing, but the two of them didn't feel bored at all. Shun Julie also took the opportunity to teach her some corresponding spells when he was resting and massaging her. She was also a smart girl. She was able to learn a lot of spells and mnemonics very quickly. This made Shun Julie worry a lot less. As the two of them interacted like this, their feelings for each other naturally deepened. Ning Xiaoman no longer had any gap with him. When she lay in his arms, she didn't feel any psychological pressure at all. Even when he lowered his head to kiss her, she would hug his neck and respond to him. Of course, because they were on Kieran's back, the two of them didn't kiss too much. Although Kieran's head was facing forward and couldn't see the scenery on its back, he could still hear after all. Furthermore, with the great deity on its back, the little Qilin also reaped many benefits. Whenever Ning Xiaomo was practicing, the great deity would give the little Qilin some pointers, allowing the little Qilin to benefit greatly along the way. This group of people traveled during the day and stayed at the inn to rest at night. Ning Xiaomo still had dreams. Sometimes she could remember a little of the dream, and sometimes she couldn't remember anything at all. She didn't take it to heart. Chapter 994. The only thing that made her feel a little strange was that the person in her dreams had always been the little fox girl. She dreamt of her life in the valley with a man in white. Those fragments were very fragmented, but also very heartwarming. When Ning Xiaomo woke up, she felt as comfortable as if she had read a heartwarming novel. And every time she woke up from her dreams, she would find the moonlight flute by her pillow. Later on, she simply took the initiative to put the flute by her pillow when she slept, so as to avoid the trouble of it wandering out by itself. The further north they went, the colder it became, and gradually, there were no signs of human habitation. Especially in the last 2 days, the group flew over the ice sea, and below them were large pieces of floating ice. Naturally, there was no place like an inn to rest. Kieran was fine. It was a mythical beast, so it had strong endurance and endurance. It could fly for 2 days and 2 nights without any problem. But the strange red-crowned crane, carrying Yi Feng and the other two couldn't do the same. It had to rest after flying for 3 to 4 hours, and it also needed to eat to replenish its strength. So later on, when the group rested, they would find a large piece of floating ice to rest. The environment here was really like the Arctic Ocean in Ning Xiaomo's time. The floating ice on the sea was bigger than the previous one. The small ones were like boulders, while the big ones were as big as an island. There was no problem for a few people and 2 beasts to rest on. The only problem was the cold. Ning Xiaomo was still fine. She had trained for a long time while flying in the cold wind. Her body's strength had increased by a large margin, so her resistance to the cold was not ordinary. Therefore, when she rested on the ice floe, she didn't feel particularly cold. It wasn't hard to endure. Yin Ziyuan and Gu Ziyan couldn't do it. Gu Ziyan didn't have much psychokinesis left, and Yin Ziyuan's psychokinesis was only about human rank level 4. In this extreme cold, although the two of them were wrapped in thick fur robes, they still felt terribly cold. Gu Ziyan tried his best to endure, suppressing the desire to shiver. Although Yi Feng was a sharkman who lived in the sea, the sharkmen live in the warm Southeast Ocean. He also couldn't stand the extreme cold in the north. Fortunately, he had strong endurance and ability, so he could still walk in this extreme cold as if nothing had happened. He could also occasionally take care of the 2 people who were shivering together. But the 2 people didn't appreciate it and didn't want to accept his care. So Yi Feng could only dejectedly leave. On this day, The group rested on a floating ice island. Icicles were everywhere on the island, and each one was like a deep blue crystal. It was quite a spectacular sight. Because they were close to the ice field and it was the polar night, the sky was full of stars. Sometimes, the aurora borealis flashed in the far north. The scenery was beautiful that couldn't be seen in the Central Plains. When Ning Xiuma was in the modern era, she had traveled all over the world, but she had never been to the North Pole or the South Pole. She didn't expect that, after coming to this era, she would have the opportunity to visit a place similar to the North Pole. She felt that this trip was worth it and was in the mood to enjoy the beautiful scenery. Every time they rested, Shun Jili would pull her to the other side to rest. He didn't sit with Yin Ziyuan and the others. The almighty storage space was always rich. Every time they rested, he would give her some hot food to replenish her energy. Kirin felt that it had worked hard and deserved a share of the food. But it didn't expect that as soon as it expressed its opinion, it would be kicked into the sea by the Almighty, who made it go catch fish in the sea to eat. Although Kirin was resentful, it didn't dare to say anything in the face of the powerful Almighty. It can only go catch fish in the sea by itself. Chapter 995. Although Kirin was an aquatic mythical beast, it had no experience living in the ocean. When it first started catching fish, it didn't know what kind of fish it could catch and what it couldn't. It was also curious. When it saw that the electric ray looked strange, it excitedly tried to catch it. However, it was electrocuted and its scales almost exploded. It even caught a poisonous fish. Luckily, Ning Xiuma reminded it in time, so it didn't bite it. Otherwise, it would have been poisoned. After a few times, Kirin gained a lot of experience. When it caught fish again, it could catch fish that suited its taste. It especially loved eating sharks. This kind of overlord of the sea could only wait to die when it met Kirin. After it became a Kirin, its appetite was not small. In addition, it consumed a lot of energy from the long-distance flight, so its appetite was especially big. It could eat an entire shark in one meal. The sea was rich in seafood. Not only could it catch itself to eat, but it could also catch a few big fish for the red-crowned crane and throw them in front of it as if it was doing a favor, so that it could fill its stomach. Kirin could quickly adapt to the climate here, but the red-crowned crane obviously couldn't. Every time it stopped, it shivered so much that its feathers were almost shaken off. Yin Zuin and Lin Yiqian naturally brought a lot of dry food, but they were all frozen and hard. It was very difficult to chew on them. Ning Xiuma wanted to share her steaming hot food with them, but Shen Juli stopped her and said lightly, "You can't give it to them." Ning Xiuma didn't understand. She looked at the Almighty, but the Almighty didn't intend to explain to her. She wasn't that obedient. Without saying anything, she strode over and wanted to share some of her steaming hot buns with them. She didn't expect that when she walked in front of them, the buns had turned into frozen buns. She tried to use her fire psychokinesis to heat them up, but she didn't know why it was in vain. The buns were still as hard as rocks. She had no choice but to walk back and look at the Almighty. "What spell did you use on the food?" Shun Juli sat there leisurely and said, "It's a spell that can only be used on you." "All right, Almighty, you're a pervert." On the other side, Yin Ziyuan was wrapped in 2 layers of fur, but she was still extremely cold. Gu Ziyan was also wrapped in a thick cotton coat. He hugged Yin Ziyuan in his arms, and the two of them snuggled against each other for warmth. Yifeng was still dressed in a black robe. After sitting for a while, he raised his head and glanced at the two people cuddling together. Yin Ziyuan's little face was pale from the cold. Her little mouth was also a little blue, and her body was trembling slightly. It was obviously very difficult to endure. Yifeng's fingers tightened slightly in his sleeves. He really wanted to hold her in his arms and use Sharkman's original willpower to warm her. However, the hug she longed for was not him. Along the way, she was probably trying to avoid arousing suspicion. She almost didn't talk to him. She would rather stay beside Gu Ziyan and freeze like a cold signal bird than accept his care. As for Gu Ziyan, the only thing Gu Ziyan could do was to hold her in his arms. Yifeng stood up and looked around. Suddenly, he saw that there seemed to be a white, moving on a piece of floating ice far away. He was Sharkman, and his eyesight was very good. After a while, he saw what the white dot was, a big white bear. Although bear meat wasn't delicious, it was hot. Roasting it would help to resist the cold. More importantly, this kind of bear lived in this kind of place, so the bear's skin must be very warm. The floating ice where the bear lived was quite far from here. If he wanted to hunt the bear, he would have to swim across a cold sea. Chapter 996. His body was adapted to the warm sea water in the south. If he jumped into the cold sea water, it would take a lot of courage to swim there. His scales might be completely frostbitten. He looked at Yin Ziyuan again and made up his mind. He didn't care anymore. If he didn't take action now, Yin Ziyuan might get sick from the cold. He silently walked to the shore and leaped into the air. He transformed into his true form of a merman in the air and jumped into the dark and cold seawater. The sound of him falling into the water startled Yin Ziyuan. She looked up and saw Yi Feng's dark blue fishtail in the sea. Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't know why, but she felt that this scene was a little familiar. Something seemed to flash in her mind, but when she wanted to grab it, it disappeared without a trace. What's wrong? Gu Ziyan noticed that her body stiffened for a moment and asked with concern. Why did you jump into the sea? Yin Ziyuan asked. She was obviously surprised. Gu Ziyan also looked into the water and answered casually, he is Sharkman. He should recover faster in the sea. Is that so? Yin Ziyuan's eyes flashed with uncertainty. She felt that it wasn't so simple, but she trusted Gu Ziyan very much. Since he said so, it should be true. A cold wind blew. She couldn't help but shrink her body and cursed. Why is this damn place so cold? Gu Ziyan hugged her even tighter. Bear with it. It will be fine when we find the ice flame flower. Okay? Yin Ziyuan nodded. Although she was nestled in Gu Ziyan's arms, his body was as cold as ice, so it didn't work. Some of the heat on her body was sucked away by him. Zin, I made you suffer this time. Gu Ziyan put his face on her neck and sighed. His face was cold. Yin Ziyuan couldn't help but shiver. She shook her head and didn't care. You are my future husband. I should be good to you. Ziyuan, I will not let you down in this life. Gu Ziyan promised her. Yin Ziyuan nodded. She wanted to say something, but stopped. After a while, she finally asked the question that had been stuck in her heart. Ziyan, you love me, right? Of course. Ziyuan, I love you more than life. What about Rongyan? Do you love her? Gu Ziyan was startled. He looked deeply at Yin Ziyuan. Why do you ask? Yin Ziyuan glanced at Ning Xiuma's direction and sighed. Someone once told me that if you truly love someone, you would want to be with them for the rest of your life. You wouldn't be able to tolerate even half a grain of sand in your eyes. You won't allow a third party to come in. Gu Ziyan disagreed. Childish words. Ziyuan, forgive me for saying something disrespectful, but didn't your father also have a wife and concubines? How many men in this world will only marry one woman? Yin Ziyuan's face changed slightly. Her mother loved her father very much. It was because her father married Rongyan's mother that she died of anger. Now she seemed to be following in her mother's footsteps. Was she destined to be unable to get rid of the shadow of Rongyan and her mother? Rongyan's beautiful face flashed in her mind. She felt a little suffocated in her heart. She couldn't help but push Gu Ziyan's face to the side, slightly leaving his embrace. Gu Ziyan clearly sensed the change in her mood. He hurriedly hugged her tightly and coaxed her in a low voice. Ziyan, it's my mistake. I shouldn't have used father-in-law as a comparison. Don't worry, I don't love Rongyan. She is just my responsibility. I will only love you in this life. Chapter 997. Can't you just not marry her? In fact, there are many ways to take care of her. For example, we can find a good family for her. We can prepare a lot of dowry for her. Yin Ziyuan put forward her own opinion. Gu Ziyan secretly frowned. A few days ago, Yin Ziyuan was still obedient to him. He wanted to take Rong Yin as a concubine. Although she felt uncomfortable in her heart, she did not raise any objections. She didn't even say a harsh word. What's wrong this time? Could it be that the curse on her body is about to lose its effect? It can't be. According to the benefactor, this curse can last for half a year. It's only been 20 days. In fact, I don't want to marry her. But I promised her father that I would take care of her for the rest of her life. That means I will keep her by my side for the rest of my life. You don't want your husband to be a person who doesn't keep his word, do you? But, Ziyuan, you are a girl with a deep sense of righteousness. I know you will understand me and won't let me do such a treacherous thing. Don't worry. Even if I take her in, I won't let her position surpass yours. She will always be a concubine, always below you. Well, there's no point in discussing this issue. Ziyuan, let's not talk about this. Don't you like my phoenix with Guqin? When we go back, I will give it to you as a wedding gift. What do you think? Gu Ziyan changed the topic. Yin Ziyuan slightly lowered her eyes and responded with her okay. Then she didn't say anything else. That spell made her listen to his every word and be loyal to him. But when she heard his words, she still felt a little uncomfortable. What she wanted was his wholehearted love, not to compete with another woman for a higher position. But almost all women were like this. She was already lucky to be able to marry the man she loved. So, if there was a little regret, then there was a little regret. She couldn't help but glance at Ning Xiuma and slightly close her eyes. Isn't Xiuma also Master Han's concubine? It seems that no matter how outstanding a woman is, she can't escape this fate. Ever since Ning Xiuma's cultivation had reached Earth rank level 4, her hearing had become extraordinarily good. She didn't want to eavesdrop, but her ears still reluctantly heard the conversation between the two people. In response to Gu Ziyan's words, she only had 4 words to say. Get lost. What responsibility? What rules? Wasn't that just an excuse to enjoy the blessings of having 2 wives? If her man dared to take a concubine after marrying her, she would cut off his little brother and kick him out of the earth. No, she seemed to be a man's concubine. That's not right. Her status as the Almighty's concubine seemed to have been removed. She was now the Almighty's disciple. However, the Almighty's attitude towards her was not that of a disciple, but that of a man chasing after his wife. She turned around and asked Shun Jiuli, Guru, what do you think after listening to Child Gu's brilliant theory? Shun Jiuli glanced at her and said lightly, What Tom, Dick, and Harry's comments on my thoughts? Ning Xiuma. She forgot that the Almighty was high and mighty. He didn't care about the gratitude and grudges of the human world. All the rules of the human world were bullshit to him. She hugged his arm. Guru, let's not care about his theory. Let me ask you, if there was a woman in this world who was your responsibility and you promised to take care of her for the rest of her life, but you didn't love her, would you marry her? Chapter 998. Shun Jiuli was a straightforward man. There is no woman in this world that I don't like and promise to take care of for the rest of my life. He would not look for trouble like this. What if? Shun Jiuli looked at her, as if he was looking at an idiot. Of course not. He had thousands of ways to promise to take care of a person for the rest of their life. He would not choose the one that would put himself in danger. Ning Xiuma was satisfied with his answer. She was about to ask something else when she suddenly heard the roar of a bear coming from afar. Her heart skipped a beat, and she looked up. She saw a man and a bear fighting on a piece of ice far away. Yi Feng, he went to hunt a bear. Ning Xiuma took a few glances from afar before her heart sank. It was a big white bear that looked like a polar bear, but was 3 times bigger than a polar bear. It was actually a level 3 Earth rank beast and knew how to use earth magic. When it waved its claws, countless stones were thrown at Yi Feng like a storm. Yi Feng was a sharkman. He practiced water magic. Earth restrained water, so the big white bear's magic could restrain him. Therefore, Yi Feng was having a hard time fighting with it. This big white bear was the overlord of this place. Even the sharks in the sea did not dare to provoke it. Even the great white shark would take a detour when it saw it. It was used to running amok in this place. Who would have thought that someone would dare to provoke it? This place was deserted. The big white bear had never seen a human before. Of course, it had never seen sharkmen who were supposed to live in the warm sea in the south. Originally, It wanted to take a rest after gnawing on a huge fish that weighed a few hundred kilograms. Later, it discovered that there were a few figures that it had never seen before. It felt that it was quite strange, so it rode on the floating ice and wanted to take a look. It wanted to see what exactly dared to stay in its territory and not leave. At the same time, it wanted to show off its power. However, it did not expect that before it could see the face of the unknown object, Yifeng would suddenly jump out of the water and directly attack it with a water sword. Although Yifeng was frozen stiff in the water, his attack was still very fast. His sword pierced the big white bear's head. Yifeng's thunderous sword strike did not cause any damage to the big white bear's skin and flesh. It only caused a slight pain in its head. The big white bear was stunned. It had been attacked. The overlord's dignity was actually being challenged. The big white bear was furious, and its roar was earth-shattering. His figure moved as if he was flying, and he began to fight with Yifeng. Ning Xuema stared at it for a moment before her eyes widened. Weren't bears supposed to be clumsy? Why was this one as agile as a monkey? The bear jumped up and down like lightning. It used a spell to condense large rocks to attack Yifeng. Yifeng was almost out of breath from its attacks, and he tried to find a chance to counterattack under the torrential rain of rocks. Yifeng was not used to the climate here, so when he came out of the water, his hands and feet were almost stiff. Therefore, he was at a disadvantage not long after the battle. Yifeng might not be a match for this bear. Ning Xuema turned her head to look for the little Qilin. She wanted it to go over and help her or fly over to help her. However, she discovered that the little Qilin wasn't on the island. It had gone into the sea to catch some fish. It was probably too far away, so she couldn't even see its shadow. Ning Xuema had no choice but to ask Shenjili for help. Guru, let's go over and help. Shenjili did not move. There's no need to help. Yifeng will run away if he can't win. Bears can't catch up with sharkmen in the water. Chapter 999. Ning Xuema thought about it and felt that it was right, so she felt relieved. Why would Yifeng provoke that perverted bear for no reason? A question flashed through Ning Xuema's mind, but she immediately thought of something and her expression changed slightly. Bear skin. Yifeng must have seen that Yin Ziyuan was freezing, so he went to hunt for bear skin for her. If that was the case, with Yifeng's personality, he wouldn't give up so easily. The commotion over there was naturally heard by Yin Ziyuan and Gu Ziyan. Yin Ziyuan couldn't help but look over there for a moment. Her cultivation wasn't high enough, so she couldn't see the battle clearly. After looking for a while, she couldn't see anything and became impatient. Why did he go and provoke that bear for no reason? We still have to hurry on with our journey, but he just had to go and stir up trouble. Her tone was full of blame. Although Ning Xuema was her friend, when she heard her complaints, she couldn't help but feel unfair for Yifeng. He went to hunt for bearskin for you. Yin Ziyuan was stunned. She was a young miss who grew up in the courtyard, so she didn't know a lot of life knowledge. She was puzzled. Why did he go and hunt for bearskin? Why did he go and hunt for bearskin? Bearskin is warm, my young miss. Ning Xuema couldn't help but hold her forehead. This kind of bear skin is the warmest. He saw that you were cold, so Yin Ziyuan was stunned. Her heart felt like it had been stabbed by a sharp thorn. But then something spread in her heart, and the familiar irritability rushed to the top of her head. She almost blurted out, "Who wants him to be a busybody? This person always likes to make his own decisions. Ziyuan, you should be used to being your secret guard. Protecting the master and making the master as comfortable as possible is the duty of a secret guard. He also did it for our good, so you can't blame him." Gu Ziyan put his arm around Yin Ziyuan's waist. His words seemed reasonable, but it was obvious that he was deliberately distorting Yifeng's feelings and deliberately treating him as a servant. He seemed to be understanding, but it made people want to slap him. Ning Xuema sneered. "What nonsense are you talking about?" He was not used to being a secret guard, but to protecting Ziyuan. Unlike someone who can't even deal with his fiancée, he only knows how to speak sarcastically when others put in effort. Gu Ziyan froze. He knew that Ning Xuema was not on good terms with him. She had barely spoken to him along the way, but at least she had not embarrassed him. He thought that she would tolerate him for Yin Ziyuan's sake, but he didn't expect her to speak so harshly to him now. He opened his mouth to refute, but he couldn't find the words to say. He was a little embarrassed, and after a while he sighed, "It's my fault. My body is in such a bad state, but I cause Yuan to suffer with me. I can see her cold, but I can't do anything for her." His words were too pitiful. Yin Ziyuan couldn't bear to see him embarrassed. "Ziyan, you don't have to say that. I came with you willingly. Your body is in such a state, so naturally you can't do anything for me. I won't blame you. Ziyuan, I knew you were a good girl who understood the principle of righteousness." Gu Ziyan breathed a sigh of relief, with an expression that said, "Only Yinzin knows me well." The two of them were affectionate when Ning Shuima said coldly, "Gu Ziyan, there's only one thing you can do for her, and that is to shut your sarcastic mouth." "Gu Ziyan," Yin Ziyuan couldn't help but say, "Shuima, you shut up too?" Ning Shuima's temperament was cold, and her eyes flashed with coldness. "Yin Ziyan, if you speak up for him again, I'll cut off all ties with you and never care about you again." Chapter 1000. Yin Ziyuan was speechless. Ning Xiuma turned around and walked away. She didn't want to stand with them anymore. She didn't want to be annoyed. If she didn't know that Yin Ziyuan was bewitched by a curse, which was why she was so infatuated with Gu Ziyan, she would have really cut off all ties with her just because she spoke up for Gu Ziyan without distinguishing right from wrong. "Are you angry?" Shinjili pulled her to sit beside him. "No." Ning Xiuma shook her head. She wasn't someone who got angry easily. She just felt sad for Yifeng. The specialty of the twin life curse is that the person under the curse will be loyal to the person who cast the curse. No matter how bad the person is, they will always be good in her heart. She won't allow anyone to say anything bad about them. Also, the person under the curse will have a change in personality. Shun Jiuli used telepathy to explain the knowledge of this curse to her. Ning Shuima sighed. "This curse is really scary. Which pervert taught him this method? After I break the curse on Ziyuan, I must interrogate this Gu Ziyan properly." The two of them talked while paying attention to Yifeng's movements. Yifeng seemed to be fighting with the big white bear. Although he was losing, he didn't retreat at all. "Oh no, he's injured." Ning Shuima suddenly stood up. She was about to ask Shinjili to send her over. However, Yifeng stumbled on the big ice block and fell into the sea. The big white bear was also a vengeful person. It immediately jumped into the sea. After a while, the sea started to churn violently. It was obvious that Yifeng and the big white bear were fighting fiercely at the bottom of the sea again. Ning Xiuma looked at Shun Jiuli. Shun Jiuli stood there unmoved. He just said calmly, "He can give up." Yin Ziyuan sat there. She also looked at the sea. Naturally, she also saw the commotion there. Huge waves came one after another. She did not know why, but her heart was beating so fast, and she was secretly clenching her fists even tighter. That sea region was in chaos for a full hour, and then a huge bear head popped out and roared at the sky, shaking the clouds in the sky. Then it sank. The surface of the water gradually regained its tranquility. Who won? Why hasn't any foam come out yet? Yinzin stared at the sea, her heart sinking bit by bit as time passed. "Yuan, are you still cold?" Gu Ziyan held her in his arms. "Why are you shaking so much?" Yin Ziyuan took a deep breath and did not respond to him. His eyes were still fixed on the sea. Gu Ziyan suddenly turned her around and looked into her eyes. "Ziyuan, look at me." Yin Ziyuan was forced to look at him, but her eyes were trembling. She could not help but turn back to look. "Ziyuan, do you still remember? When we first met?" Gu Ziyan began to softly reminisce with her about the past. His voice was gentle and light, but it had a strange power to calm people's hearts. Finally, Yin Ziyuan's trembling eyes calmed down and became dreamy again, as if she was immersed in a beautiful future. She looked at Gu Ziyan with her eyes gradually focused and showed her infatuation. "Zin, when we go back, we will hold the wedding. Don't worry, I will give you an equally big wedding. You're going to marry me." right? I have always liked Xian, and I have always wanted to marry you. I want to be Xian's bride. Yinzi Yuan said dreamily. Well, that's a good girl. Gu Xian kissed her forehead. He raised his head occasionally and met Shun Julie's cold, piercing gaze. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.